playing somebody really, really good. These guys in the playoffs, got teams like Kansas City. So we just got a very tough schedule.
The special city council meeting of Annapolis will be called to order at 6:30 on Monday, September 27th, 2021. At this time, would you join us for the invocation given by Alderwoman Tierney, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay. This is a St. Ignatius prayer for my buddy Fred. I thought he'd appreciate it. Good and loving God, our source of love and light, thank you for bringing us together today in a spirit of generosity. May we honor one another by keeping an open mind. May we voice our truth and listen with an open heart. May we discern your will to unite in fruitful outcome. We ask for your wisdom and grace to use our talents for the betterment of others. With gratitude, we offer this prayer in your name. Amen.
It's not mine.
I'm afraid to put mine up. I pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Probably should have explained it was that.
Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Here.
Alderman Payon.
Here.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles.
Here.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Present.
Alderman Chandlemeyer.
Aye.
Alderman Gay.
Gang.
Alderman Savage.
Present.
Alderman Arnett.
Present.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the first item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
This time I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Please. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Aye.
Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles.
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Aye.
Alderman Chandlemeyer.
Aye.
Alderman Gay. Alderman Savage.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
Aye.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is business and miscellaneous, beginning with ID 176-21, proposed closed session to consult with legal counsel.
Okay, this time I entertain a motion to move pursuant to annotated code of Maryland, General Provision Article 3-305B7 to go into closed session. Could I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Madam City Clerk, call a roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney.
Aye.
Alderman Payon.
Aye.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles.
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
Aye.
Alderman Chandlemeyer.
Aye.
Alderman Gay. Alderman Savage.
Aye.
Alderman Arnett.
Aye.
Okay, chambers are closed, mics off. I can say the same things over and over again, and they don't change. Come on in, yep. No, he just... We'll go and get him and see. I can come back on his.
Go ahead and take a seat. Everybody has to be in a seat. So, everybody has to...
So, first of all, everybody, thank you for your patience. Went a little bit over there. Great to see you all here. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda, we're back from the closed meeting, right?
Yep.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is ceremonial items, City Council citation to the No Deadbeats Club.
Alderman Gay, that's...
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So I'll read the citation first and then just go through the name. So this is in recognition of a backpack drive hosted by the following, as I'll read. Over a little over 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, a successful event in our community serving a wide variety of our constituencies. And so on behalf of the residents of the city of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of your contributions to the youth of Annapolis. As children prepare to return to school this year, the No Deadbeats Club hosted an evening providing more than 500 school uniforms along with an afternoon of great music, food, and a tons of fun for all involved. This is the first event for your group since COVID-19 pandemic began, a major organizational feat. We know that you have hosted previous successful back-to-school drives where you provided students with uniforms and school necessities. The No Deadbeats Club is committed to showcasing the positive role that African-American fathers play in their children's lives and making a commitment to strengthening engagement with young people in our community. Our students, parents, and families in the Annapolis clusters appreciate your kindness, love, and support, and most of all, the effort that shows how much you care. given under our hands in the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis this 27th day of September the 21st. And so I'll have them come up and read off the names as they come. The first is Corey Flawless McGee, who helped create this organization. Would you? I'll call the names. You get a photo with them. I don't think Ken. No. Okay. Ashley Trusty. Yeah. Would you? Aaron Holland. Yeah, of course. Christian Smooth. Mr. Dana's Barbecue, they provided all the meals that day. Deshaun Thomas. Michael Kelly. And last but not least, Markil Lewis. Yeah.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is City Council citations, tornado recovery.
Right.
Good evening. This evening, we want to thank some very special individuals and organizations for coming to the aid of those affected by the September 1st tornado. The devastation and parole affected families and businesses. At the same time, it was a wonderful example of how Annapolis comes together in times of need. Tonight, we have City Council citations to shine a light on the ways that people helped. Our nonprofit partners brought food, clothing, and supplies to our resource center. Feed Anne Arundel brought hot meals to our residents and first responders. First Christian Church brought bags of groceries. Lisa Hillman rallied Ward 1 families to donate clothing, and a young man from Boy Scout Troop 450 brought water, food, and supplies. Charitable partners stepped up too. Blessed in Tech handled donations and distributed gift cards. The Red Cross distributed water, cleanup kits, and funds, and set up a shelter for displaced residents. Zushi, a Buddhist organization, walked into the resource center and came through with volunteers to assist the cleanup, as well as direct financial support for affected families. Downtown Hope came in the door too. They assisted with a couple of difficult cases. We're grateful that we have a partner to support families with unique circumstances. We also want to thank partners who spent hours in the resource center meeting with families. Centra de Ayuda offered advice and support to our Latino families, as well as translation assistance. The Maryland Insurance Administration offered advice and advocacy to homeowners, and CERT, as always, came through with logistical assistance, traffic direction, and guidance for residents. A special thanks needs to be offered to the Mount Olive Community Life Center and the Mount Olive African Methodist Episcopal Church. Ms. Essie Ross, Chair of the Life Center Board, didn't hesitate when we called to use the facility. When we wanted more time and more hours, she only asked what else they could do to help. Ms. Denise Nisi-Valls, Facility Manager, was with us every day, supporting us in every way she could. Reverend Dr. Ronald L. Owens and Assistant Pastor Dana A. Swan were also there with us, offering assistance to the city and support to their neighbors. I have a citation here that I will read for the Mount Olive Community Life Center, and each individual organization will be receiving a similar citation. On behalf of the residents of the city of Annapolis, we're pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of your contributions to the residents of Parole in the aftermath of the September 1st Annapolis tornado. This was a tumultuous time for victims of the natural disaster, including residents and local businesses. Many people were displaced from their homes and had to immediately figure out how to cope with the devastation, power outages, and limited access to their belongings. Your team stepped in right away to support the affected with space for the city to operate a resource center. While public safety and others were able to make a determination that there were no injuries or loss of life, yes, indeed, it was a miracle. Your contributions helped residents navigate the immediate aftermath. We thank you and are so grateful for your help. Given under our hands in the Great Seal of the City of Annapolis, this 27th day of September 2021, signed by our Mayor Gavin Buckley and all members of our City Council. Thank you all so very much. God bless you all.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is City Council citations, Maritime Task Force.
Right. Okay, so. They're in order?
If you want to call them from here.
So I'm just going to call into the record all the names of the people that helped on the task force and say a huge thank you from the City of Annapolis. Those people were John Aronson, Clarence Blackwell, Marcellus Butler, Amy Clements, Jenna Davis, Debbie Dillon, Noah Donaldson, Alice Estrada, Alice. Mary Ewanson, Jen Flake, Debbie Goslin, John Hammond, Keisha Hayford, Jeff Holland, Rob Jabin, Terry Lomax, Pete McDivitt, Mark Millay, John Norton, Wendy O'Sullivan, Jeremiah Pace, Vic Pascoe, Dick Patterson, Sally Rather, Dan Roche, Jeremy Rose, Kevin Ryman, Dr. Wilfred Scott, Patrick Shaughnessy, John Stefanik, Cardi Templeton, Scott Tinker, Mike Tomasini, Bob Waldman, Leo Wilson, Susan Zeller, Eileen Fogarty, Dr. Sally Nash, Eric Lashinsky, and Stephen Rice. And I will read one of the citations. And we truly appreciate all the hard work, the consensus that you came to on this effort. And probably we have to give a big thank you to Eileen. So on behalf of the residents of the City of Annapolis, we are pleased to confer upon you this City Council citation in recognition of your active participation in the Maritime Task Force. Over more than 8 months, you tackled the challenging issues facing Annapolis's Maritime District and the maritime industry. You engaged in rigorous debate, and you forged consensus to build a healthy future for Annapolis. The maritime industry is in our city has evolved over the generations and faces unique challenges that require a recalibration of the city's maritime districts to ensure that Annapolis continues to thrive as a boating centre on the Mid-Atlantic and Chesapeake Bay region. You have delivered findings and recommendations that will help elected officials in the city create a strategy to move us forward. We thank you for sharing your expertise and experience and for being willing to give up valuable free time to volunteer for this endeavour. So for that, you all get a piece of paper. So we truly appreciate all your efforts. Thank you. This city is so much better for all the volunteerism that happens. We know you're all busy, so it means a lot to us that you would give up your time to do this. Thank you. So I'm going to let Eileen hand these out to you. You probably could come in for a photo while we're working that out.
Everybody come up for a photo. Wendy,
Get over there so that you can
Will
get the
Scott.
photo.
Okay, you want to
Why
come?
don't you get everybody together? Terry Lomax.
I'm just going to walk him out the big lessee.
Bob Wallman. Bob Wallman. Eric Oshinsky.
John Hammond.
No, I don't see him. I don't think Susan Summers
Jeff
here
is coming shortly.
Don't see Debbie.
and
Mike
Jeff Hollins.
Tomasini. Here's Mike Tomasini. There's
Stephen Rice is not here.
Double Debbie across the floor.
Today.
Alice Estrada. Mr. Alice.
She's behind you.
Noah Donaldson. Is Amy Clement here?
Oh, sorry. And what about Pete instead of?
Pete is coming. He's not here yet. Scott Tinkler is coming. John Harrison. Did everybody, Barney, did you get one? Everybody got one?
Ms. Fogarty, I'll take Mr. Pace's.
Okay, we've got his as well. Can we get a picture with the mayor?
Gill's not there. Okay, we're good. Yeah, there we go. Alrighty.
I'm gonna put on top of one
Hey,
second.
how are you, dear? Good to see you. Good to see you.
Okay, now I have to look in here again and find him.
Okay, thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is petitions, reports, and communications. A next update from the mayor.
So good evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We ran a little bit over, so truly appreciate you giving your time to the city today. Today we got word from the governor that the request that was made to President Joe Biden for federal disaster declaration in Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, and Cecil counties went through. The governor has asked for this declaration for Hurricane Ida. For Annapolis and Anne Arundel specifically, the funding will help to rebuild after the tornado that touched down on September 1 and was spawned by Ida as she moved through. The funding request will support families in their efforts to rebuild, especially in this community of generational homeowners. I thank the governor and his team for making the request, and I thank our Annapolis Office of Emergency Management for their assistance in compiling the necessary information to support the request. Let's hear it one more time for their efforts. Thank you. Well, there's great pictures of you on the front page right now. After tomorrow, we will know who got the most votes in the 3 challenged primary races. So whatever the outcome, I want the public to know what an incredibly brave thing it is to put your name forward to be a candidate for elected office. Regardless of your party, regardless of your political beliefs or backgrounds, people run for public office because they have a desire to serve the community. I want to thank all of the candidates for caring enough, for loving Annapolis and their community enough to run. One thing we know is that nobody gets into this job for the easy hours or the money, so we need to give everybody a round of applause for that. But as an elected official, one of the great things that we get to do is make progress on city projects that benefit our residents. 2 recent dedications, the taxi mural on the side of the Annapolis Department of Transportation building and the playground at Annapolis Walk, are 2 such projects. I was happy to work with Alderwoman Pendell Charles on the taxi mural and dedication, which honors our history of taxi drivers in Annapolis. It was a privilege to have Mr. Francis Harris and Mr. Charles Chesterfield Harris, 2 former taxi drivers now in their 90s, as well as Paulette Gilmer Wilderson and Phyllis Miss T. Red Adams, on behalf of other drivers at the dedication event. You see, after World War II, many returning African American veterans went to work around Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. They worked at the Naval Academy, Fort Meade, the old plastic plant in Odenton, Crownsville State Hospital, and other locations. Many of those workers were from the greatest generation. They sought out secondary, part-time employment as taxi drivers, helping residents navigate around the city in a time of not only limited public transportation services, but also limited public accommodations due to segregation. With this mural, we honor and thank the taxi drivers for their service. I also want to acknowledge Future History Now with Jeff Huntington and Julia Gibbs and their team for this beautiful piece of public art, as well as the Art in Public Places Commission and all of the patrons who sponsor. Please stop by and see this work. It's on the 300 block of Chinquapin Round Road. On that same night, we headed over to Annapolis Walk with Alderwoman Sheila Finlayson and Wrexham Park Director Archie Trader to cut the ribbon on a brand new playground. This beautiful playground includes swiggle knots, swish slides, climber spinners, and outdoor musical instruments, and is fully ADA compliant. I'm sure families are going to love this as a place for kids to play and families together. I thank everyone who came out. We had a big crowd on Monday. I want to give a shout out to Curtis Spencer for the neighbourhood cookout after the ribbon cutting. I'd also like to thank Brian Callan from my office who helped with delivery and cleanup. It was a great night. Let's hear it for these two. Thank you. On September 18th, the Mayor's Office softball team participated in the second celebrity slow pitch game against the drug-free All-Stars. I probably shouldn't say this about the Mayor's Office team, but what we lacked in athletic ability, we made up for in fashion sense with our uniforms. We looked really good out there on that field, right, Dwan? We were styling. While we didn't prevail on the final score, it's not about winning or losing, right? We had a good turnout. The game was followed by a Nat-Town anti-dope movement basketball game, a soccer clinic, a resource fair, and free food. It was a great way to bring a little fun into our educational efforts about substance use and abuse. I want to thank Newton Gentry and Jared Ferry for their work in bringing this event to Annapolis for the second year, and Adatola Ajayi from my office for organising the team and the fashion. This past weekend, we had a couple of events at City Dock. On Saturday, the Kunta Heritage Festival, the 31st annual event, which coincided with the 100th birthday of Roots author Alex Haley. There were vendors, food, art, entertainment, and perfect weather. I thank Jan Lee and her team for putting on a great event that celebrates the perseverance and cultural heritage of Africans, African Americans, and Caribbean people of African descent. On Sunday, we had an EV or electric vehicle showcase. Individual owners, dealers, and experts came to show off their vehicles, but more importantly, answer questions from people curious about electric vehicles. It was called Kick Gas. It kicked off Drive Electric Week. I thank Elvia Thompson and Lynn Forsman for organising that event. As many of you know, we are working towards building out the infrastructure around Annapolis to make it possible for more people to own electric vehicles. If we have charging stations and make it convenient, people will repay that effort by driving electric cars, which greatly reduces greenhouse gas emissions. This showcase event has grown over the past few years and connects and influences people to think differently about driving electric. Thank you to all who participated. And last night, we had our last of our City Dock summer concert events with City Dock Salsa. There is one more City Dock concert at the end of October, but for the most part, the series has wrapped up with weekly summer concerts and dance events that really made a difference this summer. I want to thank all of our musicians and dancers, especially Genevieve Torrey and Art in Public Places, so much for the work that goes into organising and arranging these free events for our residents and businesses, and they get to enjoy these free shows all throughout the summer. So it was a great summer for those events. You may have noticed on Main Street are flags from different Latin countries to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. It is truly a beautiful and welcoming sight to drive up Main Street through the heart of the historic district and see the flags of dozens of countries flying. Imagine coming here and seeing the flags of your home country and the pride of having your heritage acknowledged and officially recognised. I want to thank our Department of Public Works for hanging the flags and Laura Gutierrez from our office for arranging to get them flown this month for a second year in a row. If we could take a moment to brag about Laura. She came here in the middle of the pandemic as our Hispanic liaison in the Mayor's office. She has done an outstanding job. So much so that she is being recognized for her work by the Maryland Legislative Latino Caucus as a COVID-19 community hero, specifically their Community Leader Award. The award events will be on Saturday, October 9th in Germantown. Let's hear it for Laura. Also, a Weeping Mothers organization is providing support and resources for mothers or parents of homicide victims. They are having an event at the American Legion Post on Forest Drive this Saturday, starting at 1 p.m. The public is welcome to attend. I would like to thank Tanya Cooper Johnson for bringing this event to Annapolis. The Annapolis Police Department will be hosting a Faith and Blue event at People's Park on Sunday, October 10th. This event will take place from 1 to 5 p.m. and will be a collaborative effort to build bridges and break biases. It is hosted by clergy from the City of Annapolis, FirstNet, AT&T, and the Motorola Solutions Foundation. For more information, please visit faithandblue.org. And lastly, the Annapolis Boat Show is back this year. Let's all hear it for the boat show. With the Power Boat Show between October 7th and 10th, and the Sailboat Show between October 14th and 18th. This Sunday, October 3rd, set up for the first show will begin with some road closures in the area of Dock Street and Market Space. Please be alert to parking restrictions and changes to traffic patterns. We welcome the return of the show to our City Dock area, not only because of it's a high-profile event for the city, but also because it's a sign that we are slowly returning our economy, and the maritime industry will be one of the engines that will drive Annapolis's recovery. That is why the work of the Maritime Task Force was so important. I know we just gave them all a citation, but again, I want to thank you all for your work, give you a final round of applause, and let's go on with the meeting after that. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is reports by committee.
Oh, I'll go.
Alderman Tierney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the Transportation Committee will be meeting October 14th, and we hope to have Dr. Nash talk about the transportation portal in Parole.
Thank you. Alderman Finlayson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Rules and City Government Committee met on Tuesday, September 7th. We took up two pieces of legislation, the first being 0921, which is accessory dwelling units. We did not finish our deliberation, so we postponed action on that piece of legislation. And we also took up 02121, public ethics, and gave it a favorable recommendation. Our next meeting is scheduled for, the agenda says Thursday the 30th, but I believe that meeting has been canceled because the legislation that we were addressing, which is 0921, is on the agenda for this evening.
No. Yes.
But it's on the agenda for tonight's action. So please stay tuned for the next Rules and City Government Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Pindell Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add a couple of things. First of all, regarding the tornado, and basically the information that we had received that was going to be slim to none, that we would not receive anything from the federal government or state, possibly, because there were no injuries or fatalities. So what we decided to do was to put together a packet for each MEMA representative, outlining each and highlighting each home or business that was affected. Something historical about who lived in the home, and something special about that home or the people or the families that live there. Also, I'm going to give a shout out to Miss Mary Parker, who I call the mayor of Carver Street. About an hour after the tornado, Ms. Parker took probably at least 100 photos right after the event occurred. And we were able to provide FEMA and MEMA on a 6-hour tour on Monday 2 weeks ago. And because of that, I do believe we set ourselves apart regarding any kind of financial assistance that we were receiving. So I'd like to give a great shout out to the Ward 3 community, as well as the city, the Office of Emergency Management, the governor, and the county executive, who have overwhelmingly supported us in these efforts. It was a traumatic experience, an experience we had never had before, and to rally around and all the partners that I listed today and many more and individuals. And I'd like to give a shout out and a thank you and a huge God bless you to all of them. The other shout out I'd like to give regarding the taxi cab mural is to Mr. Adetola Ajayi, who came to me about a year ago in the mayor's office and indicated this was his idea to do the taxi cab mural. And I'd like to give him a huge round of applause and a shout out for that as well. It's been a tremendous asset to our community. The Public Safety Standing Committee did not meet in September. I basically made a general decision since COVID, since they have been working extremely hard, police, fire, and the Office of Emergency Management, unless there's legislation or something that needs to be addressed, that we would not have a meeting. But our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, October the 4th, and we'll see what's on the agenda. But they've been tremendous through this entire 18-20 month process, and have rallied around and done tremendous work in the city. I don't want to burden them up with a meeting that I do not believe that I think is prudent or necessary. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Alderman Shannemeyer, then Alderman Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow, Economic Matters will be meeting here in Council Chambers at 6:30. We will be hearing O1221 and O3021.
Thank you. Alderman Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Audit Committee met on September 20th. We discussed, again, a number of matters, including performance measures, and we will be meeting again on October the 18th at 8 a.m. We have been meeting remotely. Hopefully we'll be meeting in here, but not sure. The meeting is open to the public. Anyone interested can simply contact our city clerk, and she will give out the, what do you call the?
Link.
Yeah, the link to join the meeting.
Thank you. Alderman Gay and Alderman Annette. Thank you.
Thanks. Really quickly, our next meeting is October the 18th. I'll dedicate that whole meeting to the Teresa Wellman and the Housing Community Equity Development Group, reporting back on updates from the task force, as well as the county legislation that we prepare to move forward next year.
Thank you. Alderman Annette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Finance Committee met on September 15th to discuss the ordinance 03121, issuance of general obligation bonds. We gave that a favorable recommendation to the City Council. Our next meeting will be on October 6th.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is comments by the general public.
So during comments by the general public, the public may not speak on any item not scheduled for public hearing tonight. The legislation that is scheduled for public hearing tonight is R2621. So there'll be a little confusion probably when you sign up. So we'll make sure if you're here to talk on the Maritime Task Force strategy, strengthening a maritime industry, there'll be a time to come forward. We'll call you up on that specifically. Also on 02221, Administrative Hearing Officer for Contract Established, and 02521, Waterfront Maritime Zoning District Uses, 03421, Forest Conservation, Reforestation, and 03521, Acceptable Forms of Signature. So anybody that is speaking on any of those things, we will call you up specifically on that category. Anybody that's talking about anything outside of that can come forward. First of all, before you do that, I will Skype in one person. Okay, is Ted Shields in the room? Ted Shields? Okay, so I will read written testimony into the record. We have Philip Wasilewski, 42 Saddle Ridge Road, Annapolis. Alex Pline, 305 Montgomery Ave, Annapolis. Tiffany Harvey, 12 West Street, Annapolis. And Bevan Bukeister, 5 Wagner Street, Annapolis. All of those people have submitted written testimony. I now have a list of people outside of the things that we talked about. The first on the list is Jay Antonelli. Please come forward and speak. State your full name and address for the record, Jay. Thanks. Good to see you.
Sure. Good to see you, Mayor. Council, thank you very much for speaking. My name is John Antonelli. I live at 1206 Poplar Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland. I've had a home.
Sorry, John, your mic's on. Is that on? Can you just... no mic there? Let me get someone over there.
Oh, okay.
I apologize. We'll bring it to you. Yeah.
Uh-oh, not gonna fall. Again, I'm sorry. Thank you, City Council, Mayor. My name is John Antonelli. I live at 1206 Poplar Avenue in Annapolis, Maryland. I'm here to speak on 0921, the bill concerning ADUs and its inability to have for an ADU to allow short-term rental. My house I currently live in was built in 1934. I have an ADU in my backyard, and I have a current short-term rental license. I religiously pay my 7% sales tax to the city for my short-term rental. If 0921 passes the way it is written right now, this will take away my ability to short-term rent that property. As a young boy, I learned there's a couple things that my father taught me, and that's to never assume anything. And if the purpose, from what I understand with the passing of this bill, is to allow more affordable housing in the city of Annapolis, but by telling me that I have to now use my ADU for only long-term rental, you're assuming that I want my family of 6 people to share my backyard with people I don't know. Because that's what will happen if you put people in my backyard for a long-term rental license. I'm currently set up in my situation where it is a shared spot, and a long-term rental is not feasible for my living purposes. And the short-term rental license also allows me the flexibility to allow family from out of town, which I have many. My in-laws are all from Europe, and my parents live in Vermont. My brother is in New Jersey, and out of family comes into town all the time to visit my family. If I long-term rent that, I don't have the space to house my extended family any longer, because now I'm in a different situation. But again, this is all under the assumption that I would want to choose to long-term rent that place. And in my mind, I'm not going to long-term rent my ADU, which does not do anything for passing of that bill, because it's not going to help you in the city create another opportunity for a long-term rental agreement. So
thank you.
Please pass it with the amendments as written by Alderman Schneidermeyer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is John O'Leary.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. My name is John O'Leary. I live at 1201 Cromwell Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland, 21403. I am speaking to you in regards to a request to have a Halloween celebration on City Dock. And to get to that final request, let me take a step back and talk about the last time I presented to you, which was to request or to plead in front of you in terms of the Annapolis St. Patrick's Parade and having our fee waived. And we did, and you all voted to have that fee waived in the amount of about $10,000. That money that was saved, we in turn donated to Warrior Events, which is the organization that will benefit from this celebration on City Dock, hopefully on October 30th. Warrior Events turned that $10,000 into $100,000 and bought 10,000 meals from local restaurants and donated those meals to first responders and to Feed Anne Arundel. I get quite choked up about it because it was quite a year and a half of the things that went on, obviously for all of us, but for the visiting of the folks that received these meals and the folks that donated the meals and received the payments for the meals. And we felt that we kept a lot of these businesses in business with a lot of help from you and from the federal government, the state government, and the city government. So thank you for that. Well, we're coming towards the end of our, our pocketbook as it relates to that process, and we'd like to continue having events that allow us to fill those coffers, as well as put on great events in the Annapolis area so that we can all have a great time and celebrate. So as we went through tonight, I think about Mary and her publications. I think about our friends that have businesses on the water. I heard about Feed Anne Arundel. I heard Annapolis Green and the Maritime Museum, and concerts on City Dock. Flags on Main Street that we changed into, or that you all changed to Irish flags. And I guess the point of that is this is one great community. My goal is to continue to bring events of this nature to this community, and I ask that you approve this Halloween party. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up is Gepard. Gepard Old. Does that ring a bell? Is someone still here? Gepard? Okay, I don't see anybody. Would anybody else like to come forward and speak before we close the public hearing? If it's on ADUs, please come up. How you doing?
Are we masks on for or masks off for public comment?
Yeah, when you can take it off to comment.
Okay.
Sure. I mean,
Cheers.
Says the guy with his mask off. Sorry, I can't not fog my glasses up.
Okay. Yes. Well, I'm very sympathetic to glasses fogging. My name is Susan Margulies. I live at 113 Conduit Street, and I'm here to speak on the ADU Bill 0921. And Mayor Buckley, I'm here today to speak and appeal directly to you because there's a problem in the bill as written. There's a problem in 0921. The problem is the wording. If you build an ADU, you cannot short-term rent the ADU, and you cannot short-term rent your primary residence either. So here's a scenario. You're a homeowner, and you short-term rent the guest room in your own home. You short-term rent it to parents on Navy football games. You short-term rent it to parents on Plead Parents Weekend. But not just that, because remember that here in the city of Annapolis, the definition of a short-term rental is any agreement, written or oral, for lodging less than 90 days. So a short-term rental not only covers Airbnb and VRBO, which the city gets 7% tax revenue from, but it also covers doctors and nurses on 2-week rotations at Anne Arundel Medical Center. It covers actors coming in for our shows 6 weeks at a time. It covers all sorts of different people coming to Annapolis for all kinds of different reasons. And I like to say that the way this bill is written, it's hello garage apartment, goodbye Airbnb, and building an ADU becomes a punishment because you lose that revenue stream in the guest room in your own home. But there's a fix for this. There's a fix for this right on the table in front of you, and that fix is Amendment 3. So I'm asking you to use your influence, use your voice, and help this city council pass Amendment 3. Because homeowners, we, the ones that are out here today, we're the ones who are going to build these these ADUs for you. Remember gently that you are not the ones out there with the money and the hammers and the nails. It's us out here who are going to be building the ADUs for you. And life is crazy and complicated, and you need flexibility. Your homeowners need flexibility. They don't want to build an ADU and then be forced to keep it vacant, because the only use they can put it to is to short-term rent while they're waiting for their mother, who has Parkinson's, to give up her own home and come and live with the ADU. There could be so many reasons why a short-term rental is the only appropriate use of a home. And remember, we're trying to give you tax revenue in that form of that 7% hotel tax. So we're asking to follow all your rules and regulations and then pay you money to leave us alone. And it's really hard to understand why you won't let that happen. Pass 0921 tonight with Amendment 3. Cheers. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward and speak? Please. If you're here for anything related to the maritime stuff, there is a moment to speak coming up for that. If it's on anything, you can speak on anything outside of that. Yep.
Okay, so
Hi, Sandra Elwood, 1420 Catlin Place. Just wanted to make a few comments to the council regarding the work session I observed online just about a week ago, not even, regarding the police reform legislation that's been put forth. I listened to the session and I was really confused about what it is that we're attempting to do here in the city, and listened to the remarks of the city attorney and the complexity of attempting to pass legislation that I could only characterize listening to the session as we're trying to over-engineer a solution that's seeking a problem. And it concerned me because we really are blessed here to have a really wonderful leadership team in our police department. We've been really blessed to be exempted from some of the really ugly things happening on the national stage. The state has passed a series of legislation that will rain down on our department no matter what we do, that we haven't even fully baked and implemented yet. I feel like the legislation feels like it's ahead of itself. Maybe a lot of it won't be needed. It was a rather heated exchange. You had the chief of police here talking very passionately about the burden it was placing on the department. I just don't see why we would do that now, and why we weren't including the stakeholders locally for the state's attorney's office, that this legislation could significantly impact their ability for that department to execute on the safety of this community. And also, it would create a problem with just morale, recruitment, retention, and I just don't want to see us get into that sort of thing when it's not really needed yet. If we wanted to pass a resolution to have some statements of purpose, of mission, of the direction and the position that the city has about anything to do with policing, I think we could do that by a resolution without enacting legislation that's burdensome and that could actually have a counter effect of what we're trying to achieve. One of the statements that kind of stuck with me, I listened to the recording twice, and there was a statement about our job is to legislate here. Our job is to legislate here. And it took me a minute to really think about it. And you said at the beginning of the session, Mayor, the job of the council is to serve the people. That is the job of the city council. It's sort of the equivalent of, I'm a nurse, my job is to do interventions with patients, but that's not my job. My job is to serve my patients first, and because of that job, as a consequence of that employment, I sometimes have to do interventions, but that is not always lined up. The first position this council needs to make is to serve the people and the interests of the city and be a steward of that, and to do the actions legislatively that line up with that service, not legislate for the sake of legislation. Just because it sounds like a good idea doesn't mean it always is. So my thoughts were listening to that. You had a fairly impassioned speech by the chief. Get all the stakeholders involved. Get the state's attorney involved in that legislative process. Sit down with the chief and get his input and craft something that we can all be proud of. Not something that's overburdening the city and the resources we have that are precious and taking away from the safety of our community. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward? State your full name and address. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Laura Hamby. My address is 7055 Bayfront Drive. I am the face of a person with an accessory dwelling unit. I have, or a dwelling unit, if you will, a basement apartment. It is greater than 850 square feet. I would like to make that point because I realize there's an amendment in that regard. And I am currently short-term renting. I am licensed, and I'm providing a significant contribution to Annapolis's tourism industry. I've spoken before about my contributions from a tax perspective, and what I want to focus tonight is on how what I do spills over to the other businesses here in Annapolis. This is, I'm going to read from a review that I've had recently from a family that stayed with me in July for a few days. They say, we made several trips out to see some of the area, including the Sandy Point Beach and the Naval Base. Had some great meals as well. Recommend the donuts at Sandy Pony, crab cakes at seafood at the Boatyard Bar and Grill, delicious coffee shakes at Rise Up, and fresh seafood at Annapolis Market for a cook in ourselves night at my place. The local grocery store will steam shrimp for you as well. Must mention that the local deer are seen often and what a treat that is. Thank you so much, Laura. You have a gorgeous place. That's free advertising. And my guests come, I make them welcome here. I show them that Annapolis is a really great place to visit. I make them feel at home, and I let that spill over to the other businesses, and I give them free advertising with these public reviews. So I would ask you to please consider this and allow 0921 to pass, allow short-term rentals, allow some leeway as far as the amount of space, and Alderman Arnett indicated at the Rules and City Government Committee meeting that it's not reasonable to insist on a burden on homeowners with ADUs that does not apply to everyone. And in that case, he was referencing an amendment about stormwater requirements that does not otherwise apply to structures that are being built. I do fully agree with this. And similarly, I think it's unfair to dictate for only those homeowners with accessory dwelling units how we use our homes. The question is, should ADUs be legal? I think absolutely they should, providing a great service to Annapolis. People want to come and use them. I use ADUs, I use Airbnb when I go on vacation with my family. It's a great way to see a new town. And I really do hope that you consider these comments in when you review the bill 0921. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward and speak? Please come forward. Please come forward. I think I might have called you earlier, but please come forward, state your full name and address.
My name is Gerard Field. I live at 986 Yachtsman Way, Annapolis, 21403. Just a couple of things under public hearings, 02221, Administrative Hearing Officer by contract established. Perhaps I'm a little shallow on government procedure, but I was beyond belief that a position that has powers and duties, including revising the powers and duties of the Planning Commission, revising the powers and duties of the Board of Appeals, revising procedures for major site design plan applications, plan development, special exceptions, various. This is the whole ballgame. I find it hard to believe not only that they would replace 3 people, which is sort of more of a democratic, 3 people involved with 1 person. I guess that I would, from my point of view, that's kind of a dictatorship. But the point is that he's not an elected, or he's established by contract. So he's, how should I put this? He's one more step removed away from direct access. Though I must say that, in all fairness, a contract employee can be fired, whereas a government official cannot be fired. You have to find another way. So I would consider this, I don't want to use the word ridiculous, but I can't imagine where that came from. Can I go to another subject?
Yes, please.
Waterfront Maritime zoning districts uses. I'm not sure what all they want to do, but there are quite a few marinas, and I would say there's quite a few marinas in Annapolis, and established businesses. And it seems that although they don't have fences on their main driveways, there's really not an invitation for pedestrians or tourists to walk up to the water on their premises. I think water access should be instituted if possible, even though it's private property. It's private and it's not private. I assume that the marina operators own the slips that they rent out, and they go by the market as the market will bear. If there's a shortage, the price goes up. And
thank you, Gerard.
I think they should have different scales. And I guess I'm running out of time. The only other thing I want to say is there are very few, if any, citizen-free small boat launching facilities in and around on the water, in and around Annapolis. And I certainly think you guys should look at if they couldn't put it some more in just for, well, everybody knows what a boat launch is for small boats is. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward?
Good evening. My name is Nushi Carrera. I live at 909 Wells Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland, in Eastport neighborhood. Thank you for all that you do. We really appreciate you. And like the wonderful nurse said, we thank you for serving us. I have no idea why all these legislations have to be so complicated. I mean, now we have 10 amendments on a 0921. Why can't we just make it clear, make it enforceable, make it easier for homeowners, for residents, for renters, for the city officials who need to enforce these legislations, and just please just let us give you the taxes that we are producing on our rentals, bringing in tourist midshipmen parents and families. I, being a midshipman, ex-midshipman mom, she's now a lawyer after serving 7 years in the Navy. I understand. I mean, they're just thrilled by the fact that their children are here. And also there are officers who need to live in my basement apartment that currently is a short-term rental and one stove away from being an ADU. You're just going to make me probably break the rules and the law because it's going to be so complicated. I don't know which legislation I have to pay attention to and which amendments you guys are going to pass. So please don't make it complicated, because I can guarantee you it won't be enforced if it's complicated. And we can sit here and look at many amendments and legislations has passed, some by some of you and some by people prior to you, that are not enforceable. So we appreciate you passing it with Amendment 3 and make it done. And let's just close the case here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Would you else like to come forward? Thank you. State your full name and address.
I'm Greg Cantori, and I live at 105 Eastern Avenue in Eastport. And I just wanted to bring sort of a broader vision here, is that right now I'm in the process of building 2 ADUs, one in Baltimore County for one daughter and one in Montgomery County for another daughter. So I have real life experience of what it's like to work with the municipalities in those different jurisdictions. Both my daughters are caregivers. They care for the elderly. One works directly with a woman in her home that allow her to do her activities of daily living, and she's paid very, very little to do so. My other daughter works as a chiropractic assistant. Both jobs are very relatively low-income jobs, about $15 an hour, to give you an idea. But they both own their homes, but they both cannot, because of circumstances, continue to pay their mortgage. So what we're doing is building these ADUs, one in each house, to go ahead and allow them to have rental income so they can stay where they are, stay close to their work, and do the good work that they're doing for people on a very low income. Now, I'm telling you this because what I have learned is I thought Montgomery County had a very progressive ADU law, but they don't. They require, for instance, a hearing to get a rental license. And then after the rental license, you can go and get your permit to go, and the permitting process is very convoluted. The rules are extraordinarily difficult to comply with. 12-foot setback in the backyard, for instance, which eliminates an ADU for a lot of people if you want to build a separate ADU in the backyard. Also, they have a parking requirement, just like this bill does, on 0921, has a parking requirement. And at first that sounds like it makes a lot of sense, but think about this. You are actually discriminating against the lower income homeowners when you do that, because a lot of lower income homeowners do not have driveways. They can't afford the driveways, they don't have the larger lots. And so it's critical not to include a parking restriction. That is what we call a poison pill for an ADU. If your rationale and your intent is to go ahead and get ADUs established in this city, then you need to remove the restrictions such as parking, the other one being short-term rental. We are in the midst of a crisis, climate, racial, housing affordability crisis. We need to allow flexibility for people who live in these homes. And short-term rental is a very critical, flexible way to help someone who may not want to go ahead and rent out all the time. They may want to rent 3 months out of the year and then use it for family and then use it for other purposes. Short-term rental allows a higher income over a shorter period of time, and it's a very, very important, flexible way to have an ADU. So those are my stories. The last thing I want to tell you is I just got a call from a woman in Santa Monica. She wants to move into something like an ADU, a small home or ADU, so she can caregive her mom. But she cannot find anything affordable in the city. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Anybody else like to come forward? How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Great.
Keith Sivers. I live in Homewood, Germantown. I just wanted to come and comment and say that I really am a strong supporter of the legislation to make ADUs legal in Annapolis. I think that Annapolis is a city that's got a lot going for it, but it can be very difficult for people looking for homes. And I think we need to make a lot of changes to make Annapolis a place that's more accessible to folks from all sorts of income levels. Making ADUs available or making giving homeowners the ability to build or open ADUs on their property is just a small step in that direction. I think it should be a pretty not very disruptive step to the city. I think it's a good first step that allows us to kind of see what the impacts of these changes are. And I've done the whole gamut as an Annapolitan. I came here many, many years ago, and I was a renter, and I rented what was probably not really an ADU, but I'm sure it was someone's bedroom at some point. and it got turned from a home into a series of apartments. And I've gone all the way from there to being a homeowner in Annapolis. So I've kind of seen, that experience from both sides. And as someone who's now a homeowner, who's kind of put down roots here and started a family here, I really do feel like there's a lot of good potential in this, and that the city would be well served by becoming a place where more people can come and live, and ADUs are a great first step in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to come forward? So I declare comments by the general public closed. Thank you all. We truly appreciate it. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is public hearings, beginning with R 2620. Public hearings, beginning with R 2621, Maritime Task Force Strategy Strengthening the Maritime Industry for the purpose of adopting the strategy of the Maritime Task Force.
And looks like we have our first speaker.
Mr. Mayor, you have the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, Robert Waldman, and the Chair of the Maritime Advisory Board, who would like to report out to you. Wendy O'Sullivan, Superintendent of the National Park Service, was here but had to leave. She came to support R 2621 to encourage the council to adopt it and to give you an update on all the progress with the water access plan. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll cross Wendy off there, and Rod is the first one. Rod Jobin, come forward. Five.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's nice to see you again. Many of you were able to join us at the marina when we did that field trip to try and become acquainted with the maritime industry here in Annapolis and what it means. The maritime industry is our brand. It is what Annapolis is, and we're deeply rooted in that. As many of you know, I'm the second generation owner of Birch Haven Yacht Yard. My dad started the marina in 1959, and I've been carrying on the tradition ever since. I've also been the past president of the Marine Trades Group in Annapolis. I've also am a standing member of the Anne Arundel County Maritime Advisory Board, as well as a past Commodore of Annapolis Yacht Club. So it gives me a unique perspective to comment on the maritime industry, and I echo your sort of congratulations to Eileen. One of the strengths that we had was the assembly of the various stakeholders that came together to form a consensus. That's the biggest takeaway from this strategy, is the consensus that we were able to gain from not only property owners, marine contractors, marine tenants, slip customers, and the most important part was the community. We came together. Not everybody got what they wanted, but everybody came away with something that was satisfactory. The last thing that I want to leave you with is this idea of the continued measuring and monitoring of the health of the maritime industry. As you know, we're in this sort of predicament because it's been since 1987 that we have addressed the certain aspects of the maritime industry that are struggling. And if by accepting this strategy, we will bring together an annual review and measurement and monitoring of the success of the industry. And if it needs to be tweaked, we can continue to do so. We don't have to wait 30 years. I think that's incredibly important. So I urge you to move forward with this. The task force has worked very, very hard in putting together a strategy and adopting more specific things to do, all of which I'm sure you guys had. We don't need to go into that now, but I think it's a very well put together plan, and the strategy is very important to the health and prosperity of our brand here in the city of Annapolis, which is the maritime industry, the docks and the piers and the boats and everything about that. So I highly encourage a favorable review. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod.
Good evening. My name is Terry Lomax, and I chair the Maritime Advisory Board. I listened to Rod, and what he refers to as the brand, we refer to on the board as the postcard of the city of Annapolis as the Maritime. But it's been 34 years since the Maritime zones were enacted, and the world in Annapolis has changed, the maritime world. We were a working maritime predominantly. In 1987, we are now a recreational boating community by and large. And that boating community has also changed to be paddle boards, paddle craft. We didn't have paddle craft in 1987. You had an occasional kayak or a canoe, but it was working boats in the harbor. Now we are recreational sailboats, recreational power boats, recreational paddle craft. And that is a major change in the industry. But it's been 34 years since those maritime zones were enacted. And I, as chair of the Maritime Advisory Board, for longer than I want to be. But that being said, in the 1998 comprehensive plan, the 2009 comprehensive plan included a request or a requirement that the maritime zones be comprehensively reviewed. They were not. The 2013 City Dock Master Plan has a provision that if there's going to be a review, that should be comprehensive. It did not take place. I credit this council. This is the first council that's taken up the issue of looking at these 34-year-old zones. And it starts with the strategy that's before you tonight. It's not, and the interesting thing about the strategy is that, as Rod pointed out, the breadth of people that contributed to the strategy is very wide. All facets of the industry, property owners, users, and residents, because the maritime industry lives cheek by jowl with the residents in this city. And so it's important to have the input from everybody. But the thing that the Maritime Advisory Board, and we endorsed it, the strategy in a unanimous vote, endorsed the adoption. But the interesting thing that the Maritime Advisory Board noted in our discussion was that the zoning, the strategy encompasses more than just zoning. It encompasses water access. It encompasses retention and recruitment of businesses. It encompasses workforce training. It encompasses a strategy, Rod referred to it as monitoring and measuring. I refer to it as reporting and enforcement. And last but not least, it provides for periodic future review, and not a 34-year time frame of future review, but a 5-year time frame. It needs to be updated. The zones, not just the zones, the strategy encourages a complete update of the maritime in the city of Annapolis, and it's high time it gets done. 34 years is too long. I look forward to this council approving the strategy, and in the next 12 months working to implement the strategy along the lines of those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Okay, on the list of Alice Estrada next, as the list goes, or Bob, if you're in motion. You're after that.
Hello, I'm Alice Estrada. I'm President and CEO of the Annapolis Maritime Museum. It was an honor and pleasure to serve on this committee, and I want to first speak to the process, which of course was full of divergent opinions. And it was managed very professionally. I think Washington could take a page from our book, and Eileen did a marvelous job with that. But consensus really was reached. And I also want to speak to an organization that is dedicated to preserving maritime history. We would love nothing more than to have our working waterfront preserved, but it's evolved. And I remember a day when downtown harbor was full of workboats, and now it's all recreational boaters, and not that there's anything wrong with it, but you know, the workboats have disappeared from our landscape. we have to recognize that. It is our job and we're dedicated to preserving it, but we are evolving. We recognize that, and I do think that one takeaway for me is what can our city do to preserve and recruit maritime industries to this neighborhood, and to really be proactive about that. But anyway, I appreciated serving, and it was very fulfilling. Hopefully good comes from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you. Bob, please come forward. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Waldman. I'm the Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, and I also served on the task force and learned many things in the course of that service. Tonight's business with respect to the Maritime report and zoning takes place in two parts. First, the strategy and the general strategy that was researched, outlined, and agreed upon, and then secondly, the some actual implementation legislation, the zoning legislation, which is more specific. I'm going to come before you again, I'm sorry to say, but I want to speak now at this point simply to the general strategy and what my sense of it was and what the sense of the Planning Commission's conclusions were with respect to the general strategy. And I'll come back and talk with you about the specifics and where I think, where the Planning Commission thinks this legislation ought to go. First of all, there was profound unanimity that the strategy makes sense. And I think that that's reflective of the work that people in the industry did to come up with the kinds of general principles of flexibility, where they needed flexibility, why they needed flexibility, what kinds of flexibility did they need. Also part of that general strategy, which is reflected in an excellently written an illustrated report, very easy to read, are other aspects to making the maritime industry part of the fabric of the city of Annapolis, because we need to recall that not everybody owns a boat. And so the issues of water access began to be uncovered, began to be addressed, and ideas began to come to the surface. So I think that in general, as Mr. Lomax said, 34 years is too long for that strategy of 34 years ago to sit without a change. Clearly, things need to be changed, and the strategy makes sense. Makes a lot of sense because we are in many ways dependent upon the industry. The industry is dependent upon us, and we really do need to move forward together, and the strategies are really the obvious results of consensus. When we get to the specifics, unfortunately, what I'm going to be proposing to you is more work. But let's wait for that, and at the moment, just rest on the feelings of unanimity and consensus that the strategy represents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. Next up, Mary Ewanson.
I'm Mary Ewanson. I live at 139 Pinecrest Drive in Annapolis. And I am publisher of the local boating publications, Spin Sheet, Prop Talk, and Fish Talk, and Port Book, and also one of the owners of the Annapolis Boat Shows. And I think that it's really, really wonderful that we've gone through this process. And having been on a lot of different committees in this city and in life, one of the most gratifying things about being on a committee and participating is then actually seeing it come to fruition. And what was great about this is we didn't all agree, and we brought a lot of different ideas to the table and collaborated. And some people got more of what they wanted than others. But in the end, we came up with a pretty good compromise and a good roadmap. And I think it's a great start. and something that you all should definitely vote in favor of adopting, but also to know that we minted so many new boaters over the last 12 months because people figured out, which those who were already boaters and already had access to the water knew, that being on the water, being near the water, having that access makes you healthier. And certainly during the pandemic, that's been a really, really important escape for a lot of people. So now all these new boaters over the last 12 months, we want to keep them in. We want to make it accessible to more people. Our businesses are going to have to change. We are going to have to be flexible, and we want to be able to be flexible and need the city to work with us, need you all to work with us to be flexible. And I think, as a lot of people said, 34 years is too long to revisit things. And now we've got a good strategy in place, and we can build on it and take advantage of this and continue to support the industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Next up is Mike Tomasini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Mike Tomasini. I'm a resident of Eastport, 212 Eastern Avenue. I was happy to be able to serve as a member of the task force, but thankful to Alderman Arnett for recognizing the need and the urgency of the review of these zoning districts. Obviously thankful to the mayor for his commitment to maintaining a vital maritime hub in the city of Annapolis. I own a maritime business. I am a maritime tenant. My residence is adjacent to and across the street from maritime zone property, so I feel pretty connected to this, and I was really happy when I got the call from Eileen to participate. And the reason for that is because if I had always been watching this from the outside, if I had been tuning into the presentations and watching people present on it and never have had a voice, I may have been questioning it from my own selfish motives. Being a part of these groups and these working teams gave me the opportunity to actually listen to other maritime businesses, to other people in the industry, from people in other sectors, from the property owners who were competing with what has changed. If we think about 1987 and the maritime industry, if you wanted to open a maritime business in the city of Annapolis, you hung a shingle outside an office space, you waited for Bell Atlantic to install your phone lines, you didn't have email to dispatch your crew, you couldn't do it the way it's done now. Your phone had a cord, your tools had cords, and your vehicle was most likely unreliable, right? So here we are now, 30 years later, and the need, the muscle, the things that need to maintain the maritime industry are these working yards. These are the concepts of these triggers. The things that are really important are to be able to haul boats and be able to work on them. That's what people need. They need to have land-intensive uses that keep the boats on the hard long enough for all of the procedures to be done, right? We're the maritime hub. What can you get done here? Just about anything you need to get done on your boat, you can get done in the city of Annapolis. And if we don't hold on to those things, the things that we focused on in the group, if you don't hold on to those things, then the maritime industry will begin to shrink here. The other thing that Mr. Fields mentioned it in his testimony on the ordinance, we've got it in the strategy. It was part of my group. I'll read to you. It's on page 38. The task force was formed. There was a group that focused on water access, and all agreed that Annapolis' experience, culture, and identity, what draws people to live and visit the city, is deeply impacted by the existence of a thriving maritime districts because they are so inextricably connected to Annapolis' most important resource, its water. That's why people come here. That's why most people live here. There is a thriving maritime feel about this city, whether it's paddlecraft or power boats or fishing boats, that will continue if this is approved. This is a strategy, I think, for the future of the city, and I think it's good for all of the groups. Not everybody got what they wanted, as has been said by others, but I think all of us are going to get something out of it. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you. All right, would anyone else like to come forward? Please come forward.
All right. So my name is David Wilson, 1117 Primrose Court, and I'm talking specifically about Hawkins Cove, just as an example, right? A lot of the development, a lot of the zoning That's going on in more of the populated business areas. This is the wetland. This is part that we need to protect, but it's also part of water access. So looking specifically at it, there's a lot of erosion that has happened and happened for a while at the back of Hawkins Cove. That pier that's there, I was down there this afternoon. There's some serious improvements that need to be made. That being said, I work as a general contractor. I'm an estimator for Chesapeake Contracting Group. So I look at construction projects and try and make them cheaper all the time. So I need to know the specifics of what's going on in order to have more of an opinion of what to do. That being said, there are two main parts. There's the financial aspect, there's the ecological aspect, right? If we start designating and protecting wetlands like Hawkins Cove, we can improve the pier, make an access, put a bunch of cattails in there, and they are filtering the stormwater. They are saving the city money by absorbing that storm surge. Anytime there's a big tornado like there was very recently, it will absorb that water and lessen the erosion effects. Looking at the city budget, man, that was a rough one.
Can I just stop you a second? This is the hearing on the Maritime Task Force strategy for strengthening the maritime industry. We are working on Hawkins Cove, and I'd love to connect you with someone from the city because you obviously have a lot of knowledge that would be really helpful on that. But this is a hearing just for the Maritime Task Force stuff.
My misunderstanding.
So can I
It sounds
connect
like
you
it's
with... Lynn will get your number, and we'll connect you on that, and then the next public hearing you could come forward and speak on those ideas because they sound great. Yeah.
Good deal.
Thank you.
All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening,
How we
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The other members of the task force have spoken so effectively, I thought Ms. Fogarty was going to allow you to escape listening to me again, but here I am. She told me I had to do it. Actually, I was very proud, as I've mentioned to you before, to be a part of the task force. And I think I was there primarily because I was one of the few people on the task force that participated in the creation of the zones and their enactment so long ago. In fact, I look around the room and see that some of you on the council were not present at all at the time that they were enacted. And so all I'm really here to say this evening, after the others have spoken so clearly and directly to what we believe that we have done as a group and that we all are proud of having done together, is to recommend to you that you accept the strategy and accept it for what others have said that it is. It is essentially the foundation and the basis for all of us to work together, perhaps a new task force, the Planning and Zoning Office, the Planning Commission, the subcommittees of the council and yourselves, to see that we keep our maritime industry, which is part of our history and heritage, alive, and not just alive today, but alive in the future, and continuing to contribute to the success and the distinctive character of Annapolis as a community. So thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. And as the others have, I encourage you to enact the strategy and the report immediately. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rick Nelson of 1/2 South Acton Place, and I own the Annapolis Sailing School along with my wife, Jenny. The Annapolis Sailing School is located on Bemby Beach on the south side of Back Creek. And there we teach adult sailing lessons, we have a kidship program, we have a keelboat club. And the Annapolis Sailing School is an important part of Annapolis's history, its economy, its community. You may know it was founded in 1959 by Jerry Wood, the oldest recreational sailing school in the country. And over the years, More than 150,000 students have been taught at the Annapolis Sailing School. More than 1,000 employees have learned and taught and done excellent work there. And also the school has supported a lot of charitable efforts within the community. For example, now Brendan Sailing, which is a program for learning differences, children with learning differences, uses our beach in the summer. The school, Jenny and I, we purchased it in 2014. And people that knew me said, well, gee, Rick, you don't even sail, so why are you buying a sailing school? And I said, well, I had one boat. I couldn't get rid of money quickly enough on that. So having 20 boats really seemed to be like a great idea. But in truth, Jenny had worked at the sailing school as a teenager. There were plans in terms of how to make a much more commercial operation there. And we thought we could step in and really improve what was already there and enhance the legacy of the Annapolis Sailing School. And when Jenny had worked there, the school had 32 Rainbow 24s. That's our mainstay of our fleet, a keel boat. Had another dozen larger keel boats. And some weekends would have 130 students. When we purchased it, we have 12 Rainbows in operation, 4 larger keel boats, and maybe 30 students on a weekend. Just something we were certainly aware of. But there's challenges, therefore, from a revenue standpoint that come from that, and add to that the cyclical or the seasonal nature of our business in particular, where during the summer you have students and revenues, and then in the winter it's typically pretty fallow. And so kind of assistance in terms of those the revenues of the school would be wonderful. And therefore, the Maritime Task Force, when it stepped in and asked what could be done to enhance businesses while staying consistent with the needs of the community. And I thought a great job was done in that context. And I was a little bit surprised that sometimes there was this, I think, a false division that was posed in terms of residents versus businesses in this, because not only do we have out-of-town students, but certainly a lot of Annapolitans have learned there. Their children have gone to the kidship program. They've joined our keelboat club. And so they are part of what is in essence a school. And I look at that, maybe the two groups going back and forth, and I look at other places like, let's say, Newport, that's looking for ways of taking things away from Annapolis. And so it seems to me that if we can all work towards a common goal, it would be great. And the task force did that. And the kind of the 5 items that they've touched upon, maintaining the core nature of the maritime business, which is why Jenny and I got into this, with some enhancements on the non-maritime side is a great idea. I think things such as restaurants, to the extent that they're put in, they serve the community as well as others. Events also. I think of particular importance really is the Annapolis Maritime Industry Fund, because getting workers, particularly in a business that's seasonal, getting people taught and supporting them is quite important. And then finally, I think the new and enhanced access to the water, it's really in the interest of businesses to serve the public in that way. And I think things can be done which are in the report itself that can enhance that. So I would just encourage voting for the resolution, and I'm happy to help move its, I think, good findings forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Rick. Thank you. Anybody else like to come forward and speak?
Hello.
How you doing?
My name is Noah Donaldson. I live at 7041 Bayfront Drive. And I grew up in Annapolis. I lived on a boat when I was a baby. I did a lot of sailing as I grew up. So I've had a close connection with the water for a long time. I enjoyed living in Annapolis. I ended up moving to Sweden and lived in Stockholm for 10 years. And I also enjoyed boating there as well. When I moved back to Annapolis a few years ago, I realized that there were some things that I hadn't noticed before about Annapolis. So Sweden has very open access to the waterfront so that people of all walks of life and different income levels are able to, walk along that waterfront in certain areas in safe ways and use that waterfront. And, it wasn't until I really came back that I realized Annapolis, was somewhat open to that, but I had, I would say, a little ways to go to certainly be able to improve that a little bit. So I was very happy to be involved in the task force and help, come up with some ideas that I think will improve those things. So I just want to say I support, adopting this strategy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
How you doing?
My name's Gary Gill. I'm president of McKenzie Properties. We are the managing partner of the Annapolis City Marina Partnership. Many of you...
And Gary, if you could just give an address for us too as well, please. Your address, yeah, thank you.
My address,
yeah.
2328 West Joppa Road, Lutherville, Maryland.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to thank the task force. I think they've done a really phenomenal job of striking the right balance between preserving Maritime, which we're totally in favor of, but also understanding that in our instance, we have a product that's professional office, maritime office, and we're fortunate enough to have the EPA in there for 33 years, and they're not there anymore. And it's quite a task to find maritime professional office users. But I think one of the things that I think was very creative and, if you want to call it brilliant on the work, is that they know some of us need some help, and in exchange for that, they came up with some very creative ideas with incentives, which basically, if this goes forward substantially as it's been proffered, helps those who need some help. But on the other hand, we bring something to the party with some of these incentives, which are tremendously, I think, terrific things for the community, terrific for the maritime industry. So I just want to thank the task force for their work, and I know I've been following this for about 2 years, and I know they put a tremendous amount of work in this, and there wasn't anybody cutting corners or trying to rush this, and just a gratitude for your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Anybody else going forward?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is Jim Nolan. I appear here, as a resident of Annapolis for the last 60 years, and second of all, I appear here as an attorney representing Annapolis City Marina. Full disclosure, my home address is 55 Arundel Road, Annapolis, 21401. My business address is 125 West Street, Annapolis, 21401. Just following up on what Gary Gill just said, just a little bit of history. Over 2 years ago, it's closing in on 2.5 years ago, Annapolis City Marina approached me about an issue that was upcoming with the projected loss of approximately 1/2 of the rental tenants at Annapolis City Marina. Total rentals is about 75,000 square feet. And that was because the federal government, because in the change of administration, was going to lose a very substantial tenant that was classified as maritime. We immediately began conversations with Mayor Buckley, but also with Ross Arnett from our particular district. And both of them were helpful in moving this whole process forward about how to analyze our client's particular situation while trying to preserve the maritime character of the city of Annapolis that we all think is so important to having it preserved. So with that in mind, and what grew out of that was the concept of the Maritime Task Force. And I do want to thank you all for coming up with a concept and for implementing it. We take a look at the task force. We'd like to thank the members of the task force. We know how much time and energy and thought has gone into this. And I would just ask, when you consider the issue of adopting the strategy, I'd ask you to take a look at a couple things. Number one, take a look at the makeup of that task force. Diverse. You had every constituent group that's imaginable in the city weigh in and be part of the process. It was a very open process. I suggest that anyone who wanted to express an opinion or had their voice heard had that opportunity. I've heard a couple people grumble during Planning Commission about, well, maybe we didn't have an opportunity. And I'd suggest that that just is nonsense. It was a very open process, and it was very collaborative. And what it led to was consensus. And that's what I think this is all about. And we would urge you to adopt the strategy put forth by the task force. I will tell you that not everyone who wanted something got it or got exactly what they wanted. But the process was fair, and it was open, and it was inclusive. And I think that's the hallmark of the city, that's the way we are and should continue to be. So we would urge you to adopt this, but the outgrowth of the task force is what's coming up later, which is a consideration of 025. And we strongly support that, as we'll talk about at that time. But the final thing I would point out is that when the task force was formed, it was very clear that there were a number of issues that had to be addressed regarding the maritime industry. But there were short-term issues. Zoning was one of them, and that's what and use, and that's pretty much what 025 deals with. But likewise, there were long-term issues, such as access to water, how to finance maritime businesses, on and on and on, which do need further consideration. And I echo what Bob Waldman said and what Terry Lomax said, among others, and that is we shouldn't wait 34 years to be analyzing this very critical industry in the city of Annapolis. Times change, it's time to change this. So thank you for your consideration in adopting this.
Thank you. Anybody else coming forward? Okay. We also have John Norton. I'm not sure if that is an audio or if it's written testimony. Okay, I want to read into the record John Norton's testimony from 326 First Street, Suite 500. Also, accept into the record the Planning Commission's findings dated September 2nd, 2021. So we declare the public hearing on R-26-21 closed. Thank you all. Appreciate your testimony. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is legislative actions, beginning with second readers, R-2621 is the first item.
So is there a motion to adopt R-26-21?
So moved.
Second. Can I get a second?
Second.
Discussion. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Aye.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderwoman Kendall Charles?
Aye.
Alderwoman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Shannon Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Gay?
Aye.
Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is public hearings, beginning with 02221, Administrative Hearing Officer by contract established.
It's not going to
Point of procedure, Mr.
Sure.
Mayor.
Alderman Shannon.
My colleague Alderman Gay had a point of procedure question that I actually shared. Alderman Gay, do you want to share it or?
I just asked, is it not going to third reader?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Is it not going to third reader?
Resolutions don't have.
It's just a resolution, yeah.
Oh, okay, change my vote to abstain then. I thought we were going to third reader.
You're abstaining?
You gotta. You got reconsidered. You already did it. You're gonna have to reconsider the vote.
So we have a few people signed up to speak. I think Sandra Elwood already spoke on the, unless she's left. Alderman Gay?
Yeah, just from my constituents, I was under the impression, and I thank the city clerk for reminding me that resolutions don't go to third reader. I was under the impression that we would vote for third reader. I just voted in favor. I should have abstained from this on issues as it relates to the equity of the maritime industries. So that's just for public note. I can't change the vote, but that's just for public notice.
Thank you. So we have Sandra Elwood signed up to speak on O-22-21, Administrative Hearing Officer by contract. But she has left. I saw her speak earlier. And then Gerard already spoke on that. Thank you. So I think Robert Waldman, you're up as third signed up here. Thanks, Bob. Please come forward.
And once again, Robert Waldman, Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. I'm going to be very brief. Please read the findings of the Planning Commission. We spend a lot of time on things, and we do the best we can to deliver to you the results and the products of all of the time and effort that we spend on this stuff. And we try to do it in a concise manner. Our feelings on this bill, and I will speak only to how the bill affects the Planning Commission itself and not of the Board of Appeals, is that it is not to be passed. The recommendation of disapproval was unanimous. The feeling of the Planning Commission is that if this bill were passed, it would substitute a single person rather than the community voice, the voice of the citizenry that so often, at least in the Planning Commission chambers, adds value to the applications and the decisions that are made by us. And that all of that would be removed by having a single administrative hearing officer who would not bring to it all of the study, the discussion, the commentary, the knowledge that 5 and should be 7 people on that commission bring to every application that comes before it. So I would ask you to read those findings again and to realize that the vote was unanimous against a favorable passage of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else like to come forward and speak on O-22-21? So I'd like to accept into the record the Planning Commission's findings dated September 16th, 2021. Thank you all. I declare the public hearing on O-22-21 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, the next item for public hearing is O-25-21, Waterfront Maritime Zoning Districts.
All right. We have Rod signed up to speak first on this. Please come forward.
Thank you. Rod Jabin again, representing the task force. As you heard testimony earlier, it started out as a concern for additional flexibility needed for the WMM zones. And it's striking because you say, well, why does the maritime industry or maritime zones need any help? If you watch the 6 o'clock news, the boating business is booming. And I think it's a perfect example of why we need to continually be looking at the maritime zones and making sure that they are preserved and that they are strong. What has evolved has been the advance of technology. And so the need for professional office space that exists primarily in WMM, but also in other zones, that the demand for that space is highly reduced. And if you have a cell phone in a car, you can survive in the marine industry, especially in the soft maritime area. The soft maritime zone is what primarily the WMM zones are after, versus, if you recall, taking a tour through the boatyard at the Jabin Yacht Yard. And that's precisely why we need to address this with some zoning flexibility, to make sure that those folks have some flexibility to be able to lease their space. The other issues, the other areas that are so critical is the looking into the waterfront access. And I know that that's a big hot topic, but the maritime zones play a big part. You've heard testimony all night long about how important it is to have access to the water for the residents of Annapolis and the visitors of Annapolis. And all the marinas play a vital role in that. We can talk all night long about different types of waterfront access, but I can't tell you how many people just stroll through the marinas and look out on the water and dream about going out on a paddleboard or dream about a sailboat. So the waterfront access and the commitment that the industry and the task force has made to strengthen that is critical. The other areas that the task force has zoned in on is the idea of just helping the hard maritime zones. And that's where this idea of restaurants came into play. It wasn't that we started this process with the idea that we wanted to have restaurants. It's that restaurants in today's marina environment, where things are resort amenities now in marinas. You come there for the weekend, you stay on your boat, you have fitness facilities, you have dining options, you have swimming pools, tennis courts, exercise places. All of that now exists in marina environments where it never did before. And so the public, your slip customers, your tenants, your employees are all demanding some sort of dining feature. And so if you look in Anne Arundel County and all up and down the East Coast, restaurants are always a contributing factor in a successful marina experience. And that's exactly what Annapolis has, is a marina experience that we're trying to protect and preserve. And so those are the main components. I'm sure you'll hear others testify about the more detailed stuff that you guys all have in front of you. But it's imperative that we accept this and we work on it now, because again, although we're, because we're so successful in the timing right now, the challenges are cyclical, the challenges come and go. But even in the best of times, like we're in now, we still have to address these needs and add some flexibility to make sure we can continue to thrive as the industry evolves. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Alderman Annette. Rod, Alderman Annette just want to ask a question.
Thank you. I drove the WMI end of last week. Most of the marinas there already do have a restaurant, do they not?
Yes, yeah, you're right. In WMI, which is the Jabin Yacht Yard, Port Annapolis, Annapolis Landing Marina, and Rick's operation in the sailing school, all have Class 3 delis. And the difference is that that is a deli with the maximum capacity of 1,000 square feet and less than 10 seats. And so there is extreme challenges in making a delicatessen that's only 1,000 square foot footprint a dining experience that your customers are looking for. And let's be clear about what we're trying to do in a WMI with restaurants. We are not trying to change the core operation of what we do in a maritime industry, right? We are not going there. What we're trying to do is have a contributing use allowed in that zone so that if we want to improve the restaurant so that I can have proper kitchen equipment so that I can fry an egg and make a sandwich and make a hot meal, honestly, that is not what's driving it. I don't even know if I'll be, creating a restaurant that will be serving into the night. The liquor board laughs at me when I go and they say, what are your hours, Mr. Jabin? And I say 8 o'clock to 4:30 in the afternoon. They're like, wait, did I hear that right? It's like, yeah, because it's a marina. It's not really set up for anything other than that. The restaurant expands that opportunity. And as we've heard testimony tonight, the waterfront access, the community engagement into your marina, that's another area that will promote that community access to the waterfront that will develop those dreams and boating and being able to enjoy what we all enjoy about Annapolis, which is looking at the water and being on the water.
So the reason for my question, I tried to attend as many of the task force meetings as possible, and I heard a lot of debate up and down about the size. I was with you at your cafeteria.
Yeah.
I think when this now gets turned over to the Rules Committee, we're going to like to hear more about exactly what kind of restaurant, what size, how that will mesh with your slip holders and your workers. I think you did a pretty good job of explaining it to me when we were over there, but I think we need to understand that. And one of the things that I'm grappling with personally is I've heard needs to be 4,000 square feet, 5,000 square feet, those kinds of things. That gets to be a pretty big restaurant. And so I think we need to get a better feel for the kind of restaurant that is going to make your operation and the operations in the WMI successful without really becoming quite big. The boatyard is less than 4,000 square feet. That would be quite a restaurant operation in your yard. So that's the kind of, I've not heard anybody on the council concerned about having restaurants there. I think we just need to get a sense of what
Right.
the operation is going to be like.
I don't disagree. When the task force was formed, we brought in restaurateurs and architects that commented on what size does a restaurant need to be successful. And that's where that 4,000 square foot number came from. We didn't want to put any sort of restrictions on the property owner or that WMI district if they want, because these are big facilities. The Jabin Yacht Yard is 18 and a half acres. Port Annapolis is similar. And we didn't want to put those restrictions on them concerning the size of the restaurant. We wanted, if they wanted to move forward with a restaurant, it didn't mean they had to have a 4,000 square foot restaurant. It meant that if they wanted to take advantage of that, there was an opportunity for the restaurant to be successful. And so for me personally, I would enjoy a lot more discussion on the restaurants. Happy to share with you my personal views. But as a task force, we didn't want to restrict the size of the restaurant so it would not be successful should one of the bigger sites choose to move forward with that.
Right. Well, thank you for that. And
You're welcome.
You're right. The transition from the strategy to the legislation is a big one. The legislation is where the rubber really hits the road. That's what's enforceable.
Right.
So
I understand.
We do need to have some help on thinking about that.
Right.
But thank you.
Alderman Gay, then Alderman Channelma.
Thanks. I had a quick question as it related, as mentioned, and I'm looking here within the report of water access. If you look at page 15, it says, ultimately, there was consensus that an expansion of public water access will be integral to the sustainability of the maritime districts, and with equitable access at the forefront of citywide concerns, this is any issue that districts are well suited to help resolve. And then it says underneath, recommendation, offer an incentive for 5% flexibility to maritime properties providing the identified water access opportunities to communities. If you look in the legislation, there's a definition for everything. Boat fixing, boat pump, gas pump, I mean, just everything, but there's no definition for water access. And so I would hope that that could be explained in greater detail, and particularly if businesses would be gaining an incentive for water access. So would you be given a 5% incentive to use toward the business if you just allow somebody to walk down the street and look at your property, which is not really water access, as opposed to maybe allowing them to you know, get in a boat, kayak or whatever? How does that work?
Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. I was one of the staff involved in the task force. So there are some clarifications that staff made to the legislation that have not been, they're not in the first reader, but defining public access is clearly one of those. That was a recognition that we made when the legislation was at Planning Commission. So those would need to be made part of the legislation. We are, coming out of the task force, the intent of equitable public access was exactly that, thinking about it holistically, the variety of.
Just a point of order. We are in the middle of public testimony, and we have a list of people that want to testify. It isn't deliberations right now. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's just not
That's
the
fine.
right time.
Okay.
Didn't Ross just have an entire back and forth with this gentleman?
The gentleman's not there anymore. And he's not the right person to address your concerns. So.
Okay, well, I'm not voting on it, even in the future. I just try to abstain and take away my vote. As I have issues surrounding this, I'll talk to you offline with her.
Okay. I have Terry Lomax as the next person to provide testimony.
Thank you, and I had not, I didn't realize, 2521 was actually going to be up for public hearing, and I only want to make a couple of brief comments. As Alderman Arnett said, 2521 would just be one component of the implementation. There's water access implementation that has to be worked out. I think there's a water access study. There's the original first reader does not have as strong of reporting and monitoring and measuring provisions, and there's other tweaks that there's a staff recommendations out there floating around. But what I did want to say is Alderman Arnett and I had discussed because the substance of 2521 has not come before the Maritime Advisory Board, and I deliberately didn't schedule it until after the Rules Committee, because I have offered to come to the Rules Committee also for any explanation and discussion about 2521, and then the Maritime Advisory Board will take it up promptly after the Rules Committee recommendations come out, so that we can consider both the original legislation, staff recommendations, Planning Commission recommendations, and Rules Committee recommendations, because I think there's going to be a lot of recommendations all coming out, and the idea from our board was to try to compile all of that into a single review at one time. That's all I just wanted to clarify why we hadn't looked at it yet.
So, Terry, Mr. Mayor.
I'm Terry.
Terry.
Alderman Annette has a question for you.
Sure. Yeah, so to follow up on that, and we are definitely going to need all the help we can get, and I hope more than one Rules Committee meeting, but some of the things that you and I discussed and discussed with Eric and Eileen as well is the whole use table section, and I think Rules Committee will be the time to go there. I know you had an influence on the staff recommended additional changes to the legislation, a whole enforcement section. What do you know? Code that has enforcement that comes with it. So I think we're definitely going to be looking to you and others to help us with that in the Rules Committee.
We certainly look forward to it. And I just do want to mention what Rod had talked about
if you think about Edgewood Road, there's one restaurant on Edgewood Road. It's Sam's Waterfront Cafe. It's in a marina. It's a substantial restaurant. I don't know if it's 4,000 square feet or 3,500, whatever that size is. But interestingly enough, it's in the county. It's not in the city. There's not one city restaurant on Edgewood Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Bob Waldman, you're back up now. Thank you.
Robert Waldman, Vice Chair of the Planning Commission and also a member of the task force. My third and final time this evening, and the rubber hits the road. We're now talking about really specifics, and there's absolutely no way that within 3 minutes I can go over what many of these specifics, and they're very important specifics that have to be addressed that before this legislation becomes finalized. The theme of the findings of the Planning Commission, in addition to of supporting the logic and the experience of people like Mr. Jabin, the themes became public access. How do we get people to the water? And Wendy O'Sullivan of the National Park Service was wonderful in the way she described her mission is to give the public the opportunity to engage with the water, one of the 4 basic elements of life. And a lot of the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission are oriented towards how do we make that a reality? How do we take this opportunity, this 34 years we've been waiting for this opportunity, and you heard from the young man who spent time in Sweden and comes back and finds that the waterfront is walled off. So how do we get people, how do we use what we have, and how do we open up opportunities that are now opening up as a result of this legislation? And I'm going to go extremely quickly through these recommendations, and I can only encourage you to read the recommendations from the Planning Commission. First, public access should be mandatory when there are retail establishments that are open to the public. There should not be public access for some, but not for all. If there is a restaurant that is open to the public, then there should be also access to the rest of the public. What does public access mean? Staff has done some work in that direction, and it is your job to make sure that that is adequate definition of what public access means. At a minimum, during daylight hours, unimpeded, okay? Those are minimums. Enforcement. If a property owner is not in compliance, they should not be getting incentives. The incentives for meaningful public access need to be increased. Oh my gosh. For example, shared public parking. There's a great deal of public parking in one property in one of these zones, which could become very useful in reducing some of the pressure on parking in Eastport. Please keep in mind that each zone is somewhat different than the other zones. We're talking about 3 zones. WMM on one side of Eastport, WME on the back side of Eastport, and WMI. Each of these zones is different and can be treated somewhat differently. The Planning Commission strongly recommended against large restaurants in WME. This is an example of how these zones are different. WMI is not surrounded by residential areas. WME is. And if there are restaurants on the water in WME and the noise carries across Spa Creek, you are going to have some very unhappy residents of the cities of Annapolis. We address the issue of events, funding for meaningful public access. Please read what we wrote on funding for meaningful public access. It may make it into this legislation, or it may not. But in the long run, there are opportunities for very small taxations, very small fees, which can be directed towards paying for all of the recommendations which are in the appendix to the report which you just approved for what needs to be done to make the street end parks and so forth useful.
Thank you, Bob.
That's it.
Yep. So,
unless there are questions.
So I think that that's what's happening here is this public testimony. The testimony is coming from the public. We're here to listen. We can draw this out. We can't keep debating it. If you have a quick question, Alderman Gay, please.
Thank you. Yes, I do. As Ross has said, 3. Could you point in the direction of the definition that the Planning Commission has recommended? I don't see that anywhere in our Granicus, unless I'm just completely overlooking it. And secondly, you mentioned the incentive should be increased for those actively attempting to create public access. And again, I think that the definition is critically important, which would fall back on the council, but I would appreciate the recommendation, just so we're pointing in the right direction, because as I stated previously, I would hate for individual businesses to gain incentives for doing the bare minimum. And to me, the bare minimum is having a restaurant and then saying I can walk by and think about touching the water. I mean, how selfish is that? Like, really? I mean, in this town with all of this water, I just don't get it. And so water access is to be able to get in the water, touch the water, feel the water, you know? And so I would really like to see that. And I would hope my colleagues from 3 and 4 would really support that effort, because what's missing from this conversation and has been is us. And, you know, it'll be Newtown 20 and Bywaters and, you know, et cetera, that's catching the bus all the way down to, you know, Ross's or Rob's part of the ward so they can get into the water, or Hawkins Cove or whatever, or these in-street parks that we get ran off, you know, because people think they own the property and they tell us, oh, we can't go here. And so we need to make sure that we, our people, are, you know, able to take full advantage of this, and that if incentives are being given to businesses, it shouldn't be for the bare minimum. So I really appreciate the definition and hope to work with you on that. Thank you.
Good start is the findings. How's that for a brief answer?
That was it.
Thank you.
Thank you. John Aronson is next.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is John Aronson, 707 Glendon Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm here in the capacity of the land use planner who's on the team working with Annapolis City Marina. They asked me to join the team quite a long time ago to help them absorb some of the hits they knew they were going to take and that they have taken by losing a 30,000 square foot tenant. I feel like I'm having deja vu all over again. I came to work for the city of Annapolis in 1987, and might have been the first hearing I ever attended at the city council was the adoption of the Maritime zones. And here we are again. I was really impressed because everybody seemed to get along. It seemed like everybody was willing to walk in another person's shoes. Everybody was willing to compromise. And I thought, man, this is going to be a great gig in Annapolis. Everybody gets along so well. It was a great gig, but not because everybody got along. I think you do need to look at the Planning Commission findings. I'm just going to say that the whole basis of the ordinance is the property owner gives something, the property owner gets something. And you need to really understand that if the property owner gets additional non-maritime, they're locked in. They have to keep the trigger in order to keep the non-maritime. And that's sort of the beauty of this ordinance. And that was sort of the beauty of the ordinance when it was written back in 1987, that this just kind of builds on. We do support the ordinance on behalf of Annapolis City Marina, but with some of the modifications proposed by the Planning Commission and with some of the modifications proposed by staff, which are really points of clarification. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Gerard, have you signed up again if you want to come up? Gerard Field, you are next up on here 2 times.
I spoke earlier, don't quite understand how this place works, but I don't think I've got a great deal to add at this time. However, I'll write to the task force if that's all right with you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else like to come forward and speak?
Hello. I think my more handsome brother was here just earlier speaking on the resolution. But again, Rick Nelson, I live at 1/2 South Acton Place with my wife, Jenny, and I'm here to speak in support of O2521 because I believe it helps provide incremental revenue for businesses that's needed, but in a way that's sensitive to the community and what can be provided. I think that the need for incremental revenues, it may vary for different businesses. I can't really speak for all of them. I know at the sailing school, since we bought it in 2014, from 2015 through 2020, there have been losses at the sailing school. This year actually is going to be profitable. It's a great year. But I'm actually not here to complain about that. When Jenny and I bought the school, it's not our primary source of income. It's something that we can focus on. And as I had mentioned, restoring the legacy of the school. And hopefully if you've been able to go down Back Creek or look from the Maritime Museum and see what we've done in terms of painting the rainbow boats or restoring the docks or the buildings, you can appreciate what's gone into that. And so in that respect, then someone might ask, well, gee, why then having more income, being profitable is important? And it would be wrong to, I think probably anyone, if they had a few more dollars in their pocket to spend, they would like that. But it's a bigger issue, I think, with us, because I think if the more revenues we have, we can reinvest it in the business. We can increase the compensation of our employees because there's a profit sharing plan that we've put together. And also some of our philanthropic activities, then that gives us money if they're supportive of the communities in Annapolis or the sailing overall, which we think is important to support given the decline in sailing, then it gives us funds that we can put towards that. I think the motto of the school is seriously fun. We think about that in terms of students, that it's going to be hard learning, but they're going to enjoy it. We also apply it to employees. And I think also thinking about that in terms of the stakeholders in the community. So I'm not looking for the city of Annapolis to make us profitable. That's my job, my team. And this, while the incremental revenue would be nice, I think that it's really incumbent upon us, and if the city can encourage it, there's ways that we can work together then to achieve that and to achieve the goals that are being outlined. In terms of why now, because I presume that this could be tabled and brought up in next year. For businesses, though, it's important just to have certainty, a foundation, because anything that might be planned, I don't know that the sailing school would have a restaurant or incremental non-maritime space, But not knowing, it can't even start kind of planning for it and having the discussions which have been brought up, which would be substantive. So that's why I would encourage the council to approve this so that we can actually move on to the next steps so that businesses could plan and really come up with something that works for the businesses, the residences, the community overall. So thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you.
Oops. I'll need another basket. Just pop the string. But thank you again. I'll try not to belabor this. But I did want to explain why it's a challenge with us losing the EPA after all those years. The EPA was not only the anchor to our project for over 3 decades, but in many ways they were the anchor maritime professional office user for the whole WMM strip. And we're in the office building business in other places that are not maritime, and when you lose a big tenant, we just go out and try to find another big tenant or break it up and find people. But we had an affiliated data analytics firm. I basically went to these people and said, tell me how much maritime office users are in the area of Annapolis. And their findings were out of 19,000 businesses within 15 miles, 0.9% were maritime office users, which I was even shocked it was that low. And if you're chasing 0.9% of the marketplace, and a whole lot of those aren't going to say, I'm glad you called, maybe I'll move. It's truly trying to find a needle in a haystack. So it's a real problem. And I think that's what got this all going, because we saw the EPA situation and we started getting involved and saying, what are we going to do? Because this is hard. And we have nothing against maritime office users, can't get enough of them. It's just trying to find them when they really just don't exist in a way that you can fill up that kind of space. And if we were developing a project there today, we wouldn't build it for a lot of maritime office use. We would either not do it or do something else. But we are, in a way, you could say it's our problem, but we're stuck with what's there. We can't kind of get rid of the building and say it's not there, and it's not good for anybody, economic development, tax revenues, et cetera, for that space to remain vacant. So I was pleased to see that it's not adopted, it's not passed, but that the Maritime Task Force, I think, understood this, and I think their findings are addressing this in I'd say, a reasonable and balanced way. We've tried to be good corporate citizens for many years with the project. We developed it about 39 years ago. It's totally true that I had jet brown hair when I did the project years ago with Mr. McKenzie. For many, many years, we've given a boat slip to the city fireboat just because we thought it was a nice thing to do. Just give them a slip. And then one thing we did right after COVID hit and everybody's popping up their tents with the restaurants in the community is, I told our property manager and dock master, work with the Eastport business crowd and the restaurants, et cetera. And for the last close to 18 months, we've provided 75 parking spaces to restaurant users nearby, just because we just wanted to be helpful. The last thing I want to say is the triggers that John mentioned, one of which, the only trigger we really have to avail ourselves of is the fuel dock, and we do have a fuel dock there. But we need the vitality of the project, because a fuel dock, as much as we it's nice, it's not that profitable, but we know the tanks are getting near the end of their useful life. We check them every single day like crazy with the professionals, et cetera, but we know it's coming, and we intend to replace those fuel tanks. In fact, we're trying to see if we can't get it done next fall, right after the season. It takes a while to get the permits, et cetera, but 3 years ago, the price to replace our fuel tanks was $1,250,000, and with the way everything else is going, I think it's probably going to push $1,600,000, which we're going to bite the bullet,
And we know how much those fuel docks mean in Spa Creek because there's only 2 fuel docks in Spa Creek, and we're kind of for the average boater, a little across the way, some bigger vessels. So it's just a matter that we need some help having more latitude to have more non-maritime office users because we can't find the needle in a haystack with 0.9% of the businesses within a 15-mile radius. So thank you very much for your consideration. One last thing I didn't want to forget is the 5th Street water entrance. While that's not really ours, it's right there, which seems to be a superb place to produce a good water access. And we've been allowing public access to our property, unless there's any shenanigans. We don't pay any attention. Anybody wants to walk up there and hang around and enjoy the views, et cetera. We've been doing that forever, so there's no reason why we'd have any problem continuing, of course. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you. Anybody else coming forward to speak?
Good evening, fellow citizens.
Maritime zoning district.
I gotcha.
All right.
My name's William Small, 702 Melrose Street, Annapolis, Maryland, 21401. And about the Maritime zoning districts, it seems like a great opportunity to reconcile Alderman Gay's point about access for the underprivileged with the dilemmas of the uber privileged who have these lovely waterfront properties these very privileged people have claimed all the waterfront properties along almost every shore in Annapolis, leaving very little access for those who don't have it. I myself go to great effort, ridiculous amount of effort, just to be able to launch my Hobie 17 and go sailing. And I can see just how hard it could be for someone with less means than I have to be able to keep a small watercraft available for their own use. So just like Annapolis has claimed some of my rental property income from the short-term rental at 7% approximately, which earns the city on my labor around $10,000 a year, you can redistribute that wealth, which you've claimed from me with little to no effort, and give it to the underclass. Spend it on affordable housing or affordable boat use. Spend it on giving some underclass people sailing lessons at Annapolis Sailing School. I would recommend having hey, here's a 10-pass card to the kayak rental place or the sailboat rental place, or get yourself some sailing lessons with this money that we got from our customers, our well-to-do customers, instead of just letting this money that you've gotten from my work just end up in the city's just slush fund just to disappear. Spend it on the needy and resolve Alderman Gay's concern and take that same concept and apply it to the office space that is no longer profitable for use as maritime office space. Say, well, I don't know how the laws might work as far as saying, oh, well, we want a 7% tax on maritime office space being used as regular commercial office space. But I can imagine that would add a lot of money to the city coffers. And if you can't figure out how to do it on long-term rentals, make them only do short-term rentals. Just make them rent it through Airbnb. I'm sure there's ways to get that money into the city budget and come to an agreement that helps the lower class. Please don't just let it end up in the city slush fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else coming forward?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cardi Templeton, and I, with my family, own the property at 222 Severn Avenue, Annapolis, 21403. I am a member of the Maritime Task Force and worked really hard with everyone else on that task force to come to some shared consensus on how we can help the industry without hurting the properties that have need. And you've heard from a lot of people, everyone's been correct and right. I'd like to offer my help here, but also individually, if any of you have questions and want to speak offline, to talk a little bit about the economics in WMM. I love maritime businesses, and it's reasonable that they can pay $20 to $25 a square foot. But when a space goes empty and you need to bring it up to code, $20 to $25 a square foot is not enough. In addition, there aren't enough soft maritime businesses, so office user businesses, to fill the spaces that we have in the city available to them now. So we have vacancy. And vacancy has a couple of real negatives. One is that the city loses property tax revenue because my property taxes and all the maritime properties taxes are based on the amount of income minus the amount of expense. So when I have a vacant building or a vacant space, that's property taxes lost by the city and all the goodness that comes with that. It's also lost job opportunity, right? Because if there's not a business in that space, there aren't employees in that space, and there aren't the jobs that would come in that space, right? So it's a missed opportunity there. One of the things that is really wonderful about this legislation is that it requires, as I understand it, any of the property owners to tell the city every year who's in their spaces and what those uses are and how big those spaces are. Why do I think that's particularly brilliant? Because it will start to give us some data. We will very quickly see what kind of vacancy we have, what kind of opportunity there is for maritime businesses, and to the degree that percentages are allowed non-maritime businesses to come in and fill. We'll be able to see as a city how much more we could be bringing, how many more jobs we could have, how much more personal income people could have by virtue of working, right, in those jobs, in those places, how much more property tax revenue the city could get. And if we can get this right over the fine-tuning of a few years, we'll even get to a place where we can afford to reinvest in those properties that have gone out of code, right? And we can see improvement on so many fronts. So please know that it was a hard-won consensus, that there's real economics behind it, real support for the industry, and that I'm happy to share information offline in as much detail as you would like about why it is we're suggesting what we are. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Cuddy. Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you yet again. Following up on what the speakers who preceded me on this particular matter have indicated, I thought that Cardi hit the nail on the head, quite frankly, in my capacity of representing a major maritime business in Eastport. But I'd like to make it very clear that the position of Annapolis City Marina on this matter is that we generally concur with the draft ordinance provisions as proposed in 025 to be modified by the recommendations of the Planning Commission, and further, my word, tweaked by certain revisions, technical revisions only, that have already been provided to the city staff. So we're very much in favor of 025 with those qualifications. But I would like to focus very quickly, again, on one item, and that is when the Maritime Task Force, the enabling legislation was passed, it was very clear that there were issues that were short-term and almost of an emergency situation that needed to be dealt with up front, which is what 025 does. And then there were what had been classified as long-term issues, such as public access to the water, such as how do you pay for a lot of the things? What can the government do? What kind of programs to enhance our maritime industry and public access to the water? And we would offer up that we have a lot of people with a lot of knowledge who would be happy to participate in addressing those long-term issues. But we would plead with you to not bog down the consideration of 025 while all those things are trying to be considered, because they are going to take some time, a lot of creativity. There are a lot of issues. You have to deal with the issue of public access, of private ownership rights afforded by the Constitution and otherwise to try to accomplish some public good, et cetera. So there's a lot that has to be done, but we believe that lack of action on 025 within a reasonable time is going to continue to allow harm which is currently happening, and you heard the reasons why. It's going to continue to allow that, and it's very, very difficult. So we would ask you to move forward on 025 while these other long-term matters are considered, and that is exactly what your enabling legislation on the task force called for. So we would ask you to take that into account as you consider this ordinance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else going forward? Okay, I'd like to accept into the record the Planning Commission's findings dated September 2nd, 2021. I declare the public hearing in O-25-21 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda. Thank you, everybody, for your testimony. Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is O-3421, Forest Conservation Reforestation.
Okay, I do not see Sandra Elwood out here for testimony on this. Would anyone else like to come forward and speak on O-34-21, Forest Conservation Reforestation? Okay, I'd like to accept into the record the Planning Commission's findings dated September 16th, 2021. Going once, going twice. Okay, I declare the public hearing on O-34-21 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please, next item on the agenda.
The next item is O-3521, Acceptable Forms of Signature.
Okay, we don't have any speakers signed up on that. Anybody like to speak? Thank you. I declare the public hearing on O-35-21 closed. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, legislative actions, first readers, R-2721, Itinerant Merchant Sales in Historic District, Halloween Celebration.
Is there a motion to adopt R-27-21 on first reader?
So moved.
Second. A second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, the next item on the agenda is second readers, O-921, Accessory Dwelling Units.
Is there a motion to adopt O-9-21 on second reader?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the code, I understand this is on, it says in the 90-day, I think since this went to the Planning Commission, it's a 120-day rule, but whatever. When you look at the assignments to go to standing committees after the public hearing, this is assigned principally to go to the Rules and City Government. We've started our deliberations on this, but have not been able to finish. Subsequent to the beginning of our deliberations, there have been 4 more amendments offered, and I would offer that we postpone deliberations on this until after the Rules Committee has had an opportunity to finish its deliberations and particularly take up the 4 new amendments that have been offered.
Second.
Okay, I'm just gonna, can I go to Alderman Shannon-Meyer? It's been first and second.
Well, motion to postpone supersedes the second reading.
Okay, so we have a second on that. I was trying to get to you, Alderman Shannon-Meyer, so, we'll have to. Can we discuss it? The motion?
Discussion first.
So we're discussing the motion to postpone. Alderman Shandelmeyer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have a finite amount of time to be able to push this forward. This bill has been debated in one form or another, or the concept of this bill has been debated in one form or another for over 2 years. We all kind of have our ideas on where we are on this. I've explained to the chair of the Rules Committee why I asked to push this forward. As someone who works full-time, it's increasingly difficult for me to take time off to debate each and every amendment that we've been debating since I first introduced 0921 and it got through the Planning Commission. It's gone through several committees already, and I think it is prudent to simply just put it on the vote.
Okay. Alderman Savage and Alderman Gay. I think that's what I saw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, typically I'm more sympathetic to postponement, and I'm still open if people have specific reasons that they're looking to postpone it. But in this case, I do agree with a colleague from Ward 5. We don't have much time left for meetings, and in particular for rules and government. I know we didn't finish, but we did get to finish our deliberations at Economic Matters. But in the case of rules and government, I know we're going to have peace legislation, the Maritime District legislation, and the zoning officer legislation to deal with before the end in just 4 weeks or less than 4 weeks, I guess. Probably, I hadn't looked at the calendar, 3 weeks or so. That's a lot to deal with. So I think we've been through this quite a bit. I think we should maybe just take a vote on this and then move on to some of the other legislation. As Alderman Shannemeyer said, it has been since March or April, and just similar to the peace legislation, it had been on the books for a long time, and they both had a lot of discussion. But in this case, it has made it through a number of committees already. So I am inclined to inclined to oppose postponement.
Alderman Gay? Mr. City Attorney?
Yeah, I was just, Mr. Mayor, just wanted to alert the body that the motion that has been seconded for postponement in accordance with 216.090 paragraph B requires a certain number of days for the postponement. It must be postponed for a specific amount of time, not to exceed 90 days. So just wanted to make you aware that your motion should include that.
So motion would be to postpone to the next council meeting.
Thank you. Alderman Gay? And then Alderman Finlayson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's actually been much longer than April. It's been since October of 2019, if you count the original legislation introduced by our former colleague, Alderman Rodriguez. And at the core of his attempt to push forward this legislation, and I was pleased to join him in a fight to see that particular legislation be passed, was affordable housing. That's it, period, blank. And what I've heard tonight from the public testimony that was given, what I've heard over the course of the last several months in the testimony, written and oral, is that as it stands, and with the amendment, it would not create affordable housing. Every single person that stood at that podium tonight said, I'd like to rent it to my grandmother. I'd like to rent it to my aunt or, a couple of family members when they come in occasionally, for the summers and all of that. And I think that's fine. If that's what you want to do, taking the short-term rental approach, ADU approach. But I hate to guise it under affordable housing, and that's exactly what we're doing, and I'm pissed about it, to be frank, because it's not creating affordable housing. It's not. A person who was at the podium, he clearly said, if given the option, I would rather rent as a short-term rental than long-term, because I don't want people who I don't know in my backyard. That hurts me, obviously, because I have a number of constituents who would totally benefit from some form of accessory dwelling unit at a long-term rate. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to house those college students who are living at St. John's or downtown or back and forth between Annapolis and the community college, bussing tables at McGarvey's, etc. I'm looking to house, this single mom who's in my ward who has been on the HACA waiting list for 3 years, is on subsidized housing waiting list, and she can't find a place to stay. I'm not interested in passing legislation to say, oh, okay, if you want to turn your accessory dwelling unit into a short-term rental for, 8 of the 12 months and, make bank off of that because you don't want to rent it to people who you don't know. That's just not what we set out to do in creating affordable housing. And so as it stands right now, and I would support my colleague from Ward 8 to postpone this legislation because I want to see affordable housing. That's my goal. Everybody knows that. That's, what I basically ran on. And so I don't think that this bill with the amendment would help us get to that goal.
Thank you, Alderman Finlayson, then Alderman Shannemeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sometimes it takes us a while to get it right. And instead of rushing to get things done so that we can say we've gotten something done, it oftentimes takes an awfully long time. I scheduled a second Rules Committee meeting for the express purpose of dealing with accessory dwelling legislation. The sponsor of the legislation informed me that he's not available, and he would prefer to do just as he did tonight, which was to move this, or to attempt to move this legislation forward. I am fully prepared to schedule another Rules Committee meeting so that we can hear all of the amendments to this legislation. But I'm going to leave it to the desire of the sponsor of this legislation. And if you don't have the commitment to see it through in a different way, then so be it. But I'm going to leave it to you. And it will not be at the fault of the Rules Committee or anybody else. Do you want to work this through the process, whether it's a lengthy one or not, or do you want to act upon it now to get it done?
Thank you. Alderman Shannemeyer.
First off, the bill as written does ban short-term rentals. If you'd have an issue with the amendment, I understand. You can vote against the amendment. It is okay. I am frustrated by the long length of this process because, again, it is something we have debated since 2019. I believe a lot of us have our minds made up about the legislation and the concept of the legislation. And if we keep going through the process, I work 9 to 5. I can't go take time off work every single committee hearing. I've already done a lot of it, and I don't know. If it gets delayed again, I'll ask for another special session. I'll try my best here, but I frankly think this is an attempt to try and run out the clock on it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, may I ask for a point of information? Where are we in the process? Is there a motion on the floor to postpone?
There's a motion on the floor to postpone.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Alderman Tierney?
Yeah, just very quickly, I just want to say, I think it's necessary for me to say that I didn't propose amendment number 7. It was not an effort to postpone. It was just necessary to address an issue that was very obvious from the public testimony that we've received regarding the existence of accessory dwelling units that are, with the lack of a better word, illegal and being used as short-term rental. So that was the only intent of my amendment. It was not to postpone.
Alderman Gay?
My question to my colleague from Ward 5 before we take the vote on whether to postpone or not. Well, first of all, let me say this. Obviously, I believe in the legislation. I've been a co-sponsor twice. And so I support accessory dwelling units, done, research into them. But what we have discussed and what this body has supported in, resolution, both form of resolution and codifying certain things, is affordable housing. Housing affordability, because how do you define affordable housing? We supported housing affordability. And at this point, that's not there. If we postpone, do you feel that we would be able to come to a mutual agreement on both the, not me and you, not you and I, the body, on both the owner unoccupied and the short-term rental within the next, 2 weeks? Or would you rather try to get this passed today without the amendment, without Amendment 3, and work towards a goal, maybe even in the next term, to bring back some sort of middle ground for the short-term rental folks?
Mr. Lyles, do you know if the law office completed that amendment I was talking about earlier?
I believe we did, Jacqueline, right? Yes.
Yes, please. Thank you. Look, it's, I don't know, just calling someone else for a second here. I gotta think.
Alderman Payan, can I?
Thank you.
Thank you. While you guys are talking.
Well, my comments were kind of addressed to him, but my position is if we vote on it tonight, okay, I don't think that's a good idea, but believe me, I'm used to not getting my way very often here, or at least frequently not getting my way. I understand that, but I don't see any perceptible difference with whether we vote on it in 2 weeks or we vote on it tonight. What's important is that we do vote on it before the end of the term. And I think by doing it in 2 weeks, I know that I have difficulty following, frankly, when I read amendments. Sometimes I do have difficulty reading the amendments here on my iPad, because I've got to switch off the amendments, go back to the first reader, see what lines I'm supposed to delete. Oh, if I forgot exactly what that amendment said, go back to the amendments. I think there's some of, one or two of them make this pretty palatable to me, particularly in light of Mr. Antonelli's comments. I'm not referring to the ones that you did earlier, but what he said is, hey, guys like me are, we're out of luck because we're not going to, in my ward, I do have a lot of people that rent out for Navy football weekends, for graduation. We're not as oriented as downtown people are for folks that are here at the academy or want to be here for things going on at the city dock. There are other parts of the city where things happen. And Mr. Antonelli has been very, very polite, but very persistent in his comments with me. And he may have had more of an effect on my thinking my colleague from Ward 5 knows that I was pretty dead set against this thing at the beginning, and that's not necessarily the case right now. And I feel like if I had just a little bit more time, I would at least be satisfied that I'd gone over everything, whether I'm end up being an affirmative vote or not, I can't really say, but the amendments are pretty important as far as I'm concerned. And there's one amendment, I'd like to amend the amendment, but I'm not allowed to do that, of course. I don't know. I don't see any harm in putting it off 2 weeks as long as we vote on it in 2 weeks.
Alderman Schneidermeyer.
Alderman Fayone, you're telling me that you just want the time and you're going to actually look at this with an open mind, man? I'm not trying to do this as an accusation or anything. I'm just trying to...
I just don't see what harm it is. If anybody is uncomfortable, I'd like to see what the Rules Committee recommends. I actually read committee reports and talk to the people on the committee and see why they're recommending what they're recommending. And it's important to me to get that information. Yes, I would like to study the amendments. I know that these have been made, particularly, I know that Alderwoman Tierney's was made prior to tonight. I think Alderman Arnett's were also, but, I'm reading them here, and I've got the statute right here. It's much easier for me to do. Like I said, I don't always win. I'm not always on the winning side by any means, but if we decide to vote tonight, we vote tonight. But I just don't see how there's any harm in waiting 2 weeks as long as we actually vote in 2 weeks.
Okay. In that case, Mr. Mayor, I believe the sincerity of my colleague, and the chair of rules has just shot me a private message saying that she'll try to accommodate my 9 to 5 schedule, and okay, I'm willing to postpone this.
So we have a first and a second on the postponement. All those in favour of postponement, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I'm going to abstain because I don't want to vote against that.
So Amendment 3 is really important to me. So and there is affordability, and I know a lot of people make a small amount of money to live in the houses they live in with that revenue. So I'm strongly supportive of that. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Can I make one comment, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And I've had a lot of discussion with Alderman Schneidermeyer, and I think everybody knows Ward 3's, I won't say aversion, but a concern about this legislation goes even in another direction that we've discussed before. Ours is basically the issue of enforcement. And we've had several issues in our ward concerning the area of accessible dwelling units. So I just want to kind of put that on the record. And I know Alderman Schneidermeyer, I think at some point they were supposed to get together with the Greater Parole Community Association. I think they had an offline conversation about that. So just want to put that on the record that we're in another realm when it comes to this.
I did meet with members of them in a Zoom meeting back in, I want to say March or April.
Okay. I think you had another offline conversation even more recent than that, possibly.
I am not, but I'm also planning a wedding, so...
Well, right. I think with the acting president. But anyway, thank you so much.
So we're back on the agenda, please. So, Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
Yes, the next item on the...
Talking about it, we moved on. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is O2721, Selco Partnership, doing business as Verizon Wireless Lease Agreement.
Is there a motion to adopt O-27-21 on second reader?
Second.
Second, thank you. Can I get some discussion? Alderman Annette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. This is, I think, a question to the city attorney. I did get a correspondence from someone saying, asking me if we do this lease, which is for Verizon, are other vendors like Sprint and the other people going to be excluded by this agreement, this lease agreement, or do they?
No.
No. So is there enough capacity? Because I know the last time we discussed this, these get put on poles and buildings, and the one vendor pretty much used up all of the available poles, and that was why the other vendors complained that we couldn't, they couldn't get in if we gave an exclusive lease like this to this vendor.
That's a technical issue.
It's what?
That's a technical issue. I have no idea.
Mr. City Manager, do you have any?
So as we had discussions with the various telecommunications companies, it's clear that there's a lot of money behind this. So where there's a will, there's a way. They're going to find ways to install the 5G system in the city. So some of the poles will be used, but if that's the case and they all get used, then they'll install some new poles.
But the bottom line is, we're all going to get better cell service.
Faster cell service.
Dr. Nash?
Got my vote.
That's right. Good evening, Sally Nash. I just wanted to add that it is first come, first serve, but Verizon would only need one pole on an intersection. So there would theoretically be 3 other poles on an intersection in a dense area where the other vendors could locate.
All right, thank you for that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt O-27-21 on third reader?
So moved.
Second. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Buckley?
Aye.
Alderman Tierney?
No.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderman Pendle Charles?
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Channemeyer?
Aye.
Alderman Gay? Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye, although I am curious about the no.
Do you need to know?
Okay. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Next item on the agenda is O-3121, issuance of general obligation bonds and bond anticipation notes.
Is there a motion to adopt O-31-21 on second reader?
So move.
Second.
For a second. Any discussions?
Mr. Mayor, the
Alderman Arnett.
Finance Committee and also the Financial Advisory Commission took this up and all recommended favorably.
Thank you. Alderman Payon.
Mr. Mayor, as is frequently the case, I have some concerns about the rising debt level that the city has at the present time. Having said that, though, I note that part of this would allow us to, for lack of a better term, refinance some of the bonds that we have and lower payments. I have to say that generally speaking, the purpose of these bonds, although I may or may not have liked perhaps individual situations where they're being used, but generally speaking, this is what we're supposed to use bonds for. Public works projects, long-term police or fire projects, things like that. So although I certainly have some misgivings about it, I do intend to support this.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Is there a motion to adopt O-31-21 on third reader?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Mayor Buckley?
Yes?
Alderman Tierney?
Yes.
Alderman Payon?
Aye.
Alderman Kendall Charles?
Aye.
Alderman Finlayson?
Aye.
Alderman Shandemeyer?
Aye.
Alderman Gay? Alderman Savage?
Aye.
Alderman Arnett?
Aye.
Right, the ayes have it. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is R 2221, South Annapolis Yacht Center, Public Water Access, for the purpose of requiring the Department of Planning and Zoning to hold a public meeting for the general public to be heard on South Annapolis Yacht Center fence application.
So I think
So
you're
I move-
withdrawing it, right? Or do
Pardon
we-
me?
You're withdrawing it, right?
No, I move R 2221.
Second.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask for postponement. There's action that is going to be occurring before the Building Board of Appeals this week, which I think will have bearing on this, and it may make this unnecessary. But I do think we should hear what happens before the Building Board of Appeals.
Okay,
So I
so
would
it's-
move that we postpone to the next council meeting.
And a second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, please present the next item on the agenda.
The agenda is completed, Mr. Mayor.
Chicken wings.
Acme. Anything else for good order?
Yes, I do, since I was cut off. Thank you. As it relates to the ADU legislation, I requested maybe indirectly from the Office of Law and the City Manager in our last meeting to help me tonight, and I just realized I didn't have it. There are accusations, I know the mayor just made the accusation that Amendment 3 would help with affordability.
I did not.
I thought that's what you said. You said Amendment 3 was important to you for affordability or something like what, but the accusation has been made tonight. Can we get some data and facts on that to help us make the clear decision as it relates to accessory dwelling units, short-term rentals, and the affordability rates? Thank you.
Alderman Shandemeyer?
The data, I will look for you. All I can offer is, at this exact time, is an anecdote. I've been very open why the accessory dwelling unit bill is so important to me. It's how I first came to this city, and how we define short-term rentals is anything less than 90 days. I was a month-to-month, less than 90-day thing, which would have qualified as a short-term rental, and it allowed me to build myself up and set up roots and now start living in the city.
Oh.
So I will try to find some additional information for you, a little more hard facts and figures. But let that anecdotal piece of evidence kind of show you where I'm coming from it.
Thank you. Alderman Tierney?
I just want to suggest, I did find some research in California where ADU legislation has been in place for over a year now, and it's good data for you, Dwan, because unfortunately, it does say where there are areas of higher income, the majority that used it for short-term rentals was proportionally just as high. So it's good information for you. I can send it to you. All of you, yeah. And yeah.
Thank you. Alderman Payon?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.